What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Rinnegan Naruto son of Kyuubi? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. It's been 5 years since the birth of the Namikaze Uzumaki twins and the Kyuubi incident. Due to the Kyuubi being a being of pure chakra that cannot be destroyed, the Yondaime had no other choice than to seal it within his newborn children. Within his daughter, Hikari, he sealed the yang chakra while sealing the mind and soul of the Kyuubi into his son, Naruto. Though his wife was an Uzumaki known for their resilience and longevity, in order for her to survive he had to seal the yin chakra within her. He publicly announced to the village about what he had done. The villagers revered their Hokage and his family with fanatical respect and treated them like they were royalty. Meanwhile, Naruto was treated like a plague and was thought to be the Kyuubi in human flesh. Of course his family were completely ignorant to this simple fact, due to them barely even registering his existence. Currently his parents were off training his sister so that she would be able to control Yuki's chakra, which was pointless since she didn't have Yuki's soul inside of her. Yes, Naruto knew about the Kyuubi being sealed inside of him and that the Kyuubi was a female with an actual name, not just a title. He could still remember the day he met her. Flashback no just to 4.5 years after the Kyuubi incident. Naruto was running from a mob of angry villagers who were trying to beat him to bloody pulp. He was currently running towards the Forest of Death, training ground 44. However, just before he got there he fell into a rather deep ditch that caused to fall into a cave. The villagers, having seen this, decided to go back home thinking that the demon brat had died from the apparently deep fall. Luckily for Naruto, the cave seemed to be somewhat flooded, which helped minimize whatever injuries he might have sustained. As he emerged from the water he swam towards the rocks and proceeded to lie there. Why won't they just leave me alone? Or better yet, why can't they just finally finish the job and finally kill me already? Said Naruto to no one in particular. With those final words the poor child finally passed out from exhaustion. Mindscape. Naruto opened his eyes and expected to see the cave where he had fallen into, but instead saw a sewer which had no floor, but somehow he was standing on water, which made no sense to him since he had yet to be able to unlock his chakra due to no one teaching him how. "Where am I?" asked the confused child. He was getting up when he heard some distant cries of sadness and misery. He decided to follow these sounds in order to find out where he was and hopefully console whoever was crying. What he found, however, was something no one could have prepared him for. In front of him was someone he could only describe as a beautiful demoness. Her hair was such a pure white color that it seemed as though nothing could dull the pure color. Her eyes a wonderful icy blue with slits instead of pupils. She stood at 5 feet 8 inches with D-cup borderline DD cup-sized breasts with an hourglass figure. She was wearing a royal kimono that left little to the imagination. The most notable thing about the beautiful demoness were her 2 white wolf ears on top of her head and her 10 white wolf tails coming from her rear. The wolf-like demoness was currently sitting on the water behind what seemed like a huge cage with her knees pulled into her chest, while you could hear her sobs reverberating through the mindscape. Completely ignoring the cage, Naruto decided to walk towards the female in order to comfort her. Once he reached her he wrapped his arms as much as he could due to his short arms and tried to console her by rubbing her back. At first she tensed due to the contact but gently eased into him and kept crying into his chest saying, "I'm sorry." "What are you sorry about?" asked Naruto. "It's my fault you're treated this way," said the girl rather tearfully and hesitantly. "What do you mean?" Naruto asked once more. The girl explained to him who she was and what really happened that night, that she attacked Konoha. Once she finished her story she expected him to be angry at her and to hate her, but instead she felt his hug grow slightly tighter while he said 4 words that she never thought he of all people to say. "It's not your fault." She immediately turned her head towards him and blinked the tears out of her eyes. She could not believe what she had just heard. She searched for any sort of lies by looking at his eyes, but all she saw was a gaze of pure understanding and warmth that she just lost herself in. Why don't you blame me for everything that has happened to you?" questioned the demoness. "Because it wasn't your fault and blaming you would only make me just like those asshole villagers, but I do have one question though." "What is it?" "If you're really the Kyuubi then why do you have 10 tails instead of 9? "Oh, That's because when I was being sealed into you, the Juubi no Okami spoke to me and told me that you would be its reincarnation, and in order for that to fully transpire you would need access to the Juubi's chakra, so it give me 10 tails of chakra so that when the time comes you will absorb them and become the new Juubi no Okami. Explained the girl. Oh, I guess that makes sense. Before I forget, could you please tell me your name? Asked Naruto. Yuki. Yuki Kitsune, said Yuki while having a smile on her face. The first smile she's shown anyone for centuries. Now before you go, Naruto-kun, could you please tear off a piece of the seal? This is so that we can speak to each other without you having to come in here all the time. And not that I mind you being here, it's just that in some situations it wouldn't be convenient for you to come in here. Explained Yuki, albeit the last part a little bit flustered. Also, there will be some side effects due to some of my chakra leaking out of the seal into you, so just be prepared, okay? No problem, Yuki-chan. As Naruto said that, he tore off a small piece of the seal. Then all of a sudden some white and black chakra flowed towards Naruto and started entering his system. He felt so much pain that he was unable to even make a sound until he finally passed out and returned to the real world a few hours later. Real world. What hit me? Sorry about that, Naruto-kun, but due to the changes happening to your body because of my chakra you felt some extreme pain. Are you alright? Asked Yuki worriedly. Yuki-chan, where are you? Asked Naruto, looking around to see if he can find her. I'm in your mind, silly. Just think what you want to say and I will hear you. This way no one will think you're crazy when it looks like you're just talking to empty space. Giggled out Yuki. Oh, thought Naruto in response while blushing in embarrassment. Her giggling is really cute. He thought, accidentally forgetting that Yuki could hear him. Now it was Yuki's turn to blush in embarrassment, but made no comment on the matter and instead decided to file it away for another time. Naruto-kun, check to see if you can't find any changes at all to your body, said Yuki in order to change the subject. So Naruto went closer to the water in order to see the changes in his body, and what he saw extremely surprised him. He now looked to be around 4 feet 5 inches, which was extremely tall for his age. His hair was a silver color while his eyes changed from the dark blue to a now icy blue with a black slit in the middle. He now had canines that barely went slightly past his lip. His hair now went down past his shoulders and he now had 2 wolf ears on the top of his head. He now had a six-pack with a defined but not huge muscles. Then he noticed the silver wolf tail moving around behind him. Yuki-chan, can you see this? Asked Naruto. Yes, I can, and I must admit you look a lot better like this, Naruto-kun. Purred Yuki with an almost lustful look in her eyes. Down, girl. Stop ogling him. But imagine what he'll look like when he's older. Alright, Naruto-kun, I guess it's time to start your training. You ready? Of course, Yuki-sensei. Flashback no Jutsu Kai. Right now Naruto was glaring at his family, who were training his sister while conveniently forgetting about him. Hikari Uzumaki Namikaze was 5 years old but was a carbon copy of her mother Kushina Uzumaki, except for her blue eyes that she got from her father, Minato Namikaze. But everything else she got from her mother, like her personality, temper, etc. The only reason they didn't notice the differences to his body was because he was under a demonic illusion that hid his true appearance. Right now he just looked like a Minato clone, except short and with whiskers. Right now Hikari was attempting the tree walking exercise but was failing miserably. Due to her unnaturally high reserves, her chakra control was shot to hell. It would take months if not years of practice before she had enough chakra control to make a simple henge. Yet her parents were still insistent on praising her for her valiant efforts. Come on, you can do it, Hikari-chan. Tte Bane, yelled out Kushina with her signature verbal tick. That's my daughter. You're almost to the top of the tree. Encouraged her father, Minato, when in reality she wasn't almost there. Hell, she wasn't even halfway up the tree. And the tree was only 15 feet high. Right when she got to the halfway mark she lost her control and fell off the tree where her parents caught her. Did you see that, Ka-chan, Tu-chan? I got halfway now, Datbeo. Yelled out with excitement the heir to the Namikaze Uzumaki families. Yes, Hikari was the heir to both families, since both parents think that since their son was weak, he wouldn't be able to lead the clans to greatness like his sister would. Not that Naruto cared, of course. He was planning leaving that hellhole on his 12th birthday. By then he should be more than powerful enough to escape without being brought back. Besides, the adults would be far too preoccupied celebrating his sister's birthday to notice him leave. With that last thought, he walked away into the compound but did not notice the look his sister gave him. "Oni-chan, why don't you spend time with me?" thought Hikari with a mental pout. Despite being heralded as a heroine and as the savior of the village, she didn't grow up thinking that everything belonged to her or that people should do whatever she says. All she wanted was for her Oni-chan to notice her and to be a part of the family again. Time skipped 12 years after the Kyuubi incident, early morning. Now we see Naruto training in the middle of the Forest of Death, surrounded by hundreds upon thousands of clones which were all working on one thing: chakra control. You see, throughout the years Naruto would become extremely more powerful than he was last year. Not just because of his training. Each year on his birthday he would go to the Forest of Death, set up a Fuinjutsu barrier and prepare for another tail to grow. The process of becoming the Juubi was a slow one and would take a decade for him to completely become the Juubi. He had just gone through the 7th tail construction a few hours ago and was simply refining his chakra control. Every time he grows a tail his chakra control is shot to hell, so every time this happens he makes a few thousand clones and refines his control until how it was like beforehand. In the 7 years that Yuki was training Naruto, the first thing she taught him was the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, which helped him progress through leaps and bounds. He was currently a master at Kenjutsu, Taijutsu, Genjutsu, Ninjutsu, Fuinjutsu, and in chakra manipulation. When they tested his affinities they were surprised with the result. The chakra paper was evenly cut into 6 pieces. One piece became flames as black as Amaterasu and felt just as powerful. Another piece turned completely into water. The next piece literally became sand, which signified his extremely strong affinity towards earth. The piece after that completely crumpled up into a ball so small it would fit on the tip of a pin. The second to last piece became pure ice, which signified Naruto's apparent bloodline. The last piece became a yin-yang symbol, signifying his affinity towards the yin and yang elements. After further investigation, Yuki found out that Naruto got the ice release bloodline from the chakra he absorbed from her during his transformation. This made sense since neither of Naruto's parents had that bloodline. Yuki explained that Naruto would be able to use any and every bloodline in existence once he truly becomes the Juubi, but not a moment sooner. It was complete luck that Naruto was able to unlock the Yuki bloodline so soon, considering how long it would take for him to learn the rest. When Naruto went back home that night all those years ago, his parents didn't even notice he was gone, which was both a good and bad thing. Good because Naruto didn't have to explain where he was, and bad because Naruto finally realized that his parents would never notice him. It was like he was only a stranger in their house. In that moment Naruto decided that he wouldn't put up with all the shit he had to go through each and every day. Whenever the villagers attacked him they would be caught in a genjutsu, making them think they were attacked the demon brat, when in reality they were just standing around doing nothing. While at home he completely distanced himself from the family, not even sharing words with them. While his sister noticed this change in behavior, her parents didn't, which only fueled his hatred for them. With a resounding poof, all the clones were gone and Naruto was standing up from his meditation position with a dark smirk on his face. Done. Now I have more than enough power to leave this place through force if I have to. Who knows, maybe I'll be lucky and, accidentally, kill any Konoha scum that gets in my way," said Naruto with a dark chuckle. "Wow, Naru-kun, have I mentioned how hot under the collar you make when you get your bloodthirst on?" said a rather horny Yuki. Over the years the relationship between Naruto and Yuki had begun as a teacher and student relationship, and their feelings for each other grew in time. At first they did not want to act on their feelings so as to not ruin their relationship with one another, at least until after Naruto finally broke down and gave into his hatred completely. Flashback no Jutsu. 9 years after the Kyuubi incident. It's been 4 years since Yuki has started to train Naruto to become the next Juubi. While Naruto basically hated his family for completely ignoring his existence and the villagers for making his life a living hell, he decided to not give in to his hatred completely. Instead, he decided to give them one last chance at training him before he gave up on them. Unfortunately, that last chance that he gave him was screwed over so bad that it sealed the fate for both Konoha and the Namikaze Uzumaki family. Naruto had undergone the 4th tail growth a couple months ago. He had regained his chakra control and could proudly say that his control was on a level that made Tsunade's seem like it was below genin level. Due to this, he knew and created chakra control exercises that would seem impossible to be able to perform for a human. Good thing Naruto wasn't human anymore, he. Anyway, Naruto decided he would give his parents one last chance to prove themselves to him before he gave up on them. "Hey Tu-san, Ka-san, can I show you too something?" asked Naruto with some pointless hope showing in his sapphire eyes. His parents agreed since they weren't really doing anything since Naruto's sister was taking a shower to freshen up since she had just gone through another day of training. What Naruto showed, however, caused freeze and shock. Their son was walking on the wall and was now walking on the ceiling. "Pretty good, nay?" asked Naruto with a Cheshire Cat grin on his face. What happened next was something that the two parents would regret for the rest of their lives, no matter how short that life may be. Slap slap. These sounds could be heard reverberating throughout the house. The Yondaime Hokage and his wife had just bitch-slapped their son for no reason at all. "You little ungrateful bastard. How dare you learn something like that faster than your sister? We give you a home and food to eat and yet you decide to try and show up your sister. You are nothing more than trash. A mere shadow in your sister's greatness. Now go to your room before you ruin anything shit," yelled out Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki with an unjustifiable rage towards their son. "I don't get it, why? Why do they hate me so much?" thought Naruto. And with that last thought, Naruto ran to his room, slammed the door and jumped out the window, heading towards the only safe place he has besides his mindscape. Once he reached it, he placed a barrier so that no one would sense his chakra. Once that was completed, Naruto lost it and caused most of the Forest of Death to become enormous craters the size of the Hokage monument, which he would fix the next day with some seals. Now that Naruto had released some of his pent-up anger, he passed out due to chakra exhaustion and entered the mindscape. Inside the mindscape, currently Naruto was crouched in the fetal position, sobbing his heart out, not able to understand why his parents despised his existence so much. Yuki could only do so much to help since she didn't have much experience in these kind of situations. What have I done wrong? Do they really hate me that much? Am I really just worthless trash? Maybe it would be best if I just died. After all, who would even notice that some trash like me died? Said Naruto in a voice that was void of all emotion. A void that was broken. A voice of someone that was dead inside. Slap. Once again, Naruto found himself cradling his injured cheek for seemingly no reason at all. He stared at Yuki in shock as tears kept dripping down his cheek like a broken dam. On why Yuki slapped Naruto was that she couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't bear to see the person of her affections be so utterly vulnerable and broken like this. She just couldn't, because it was killing her inside to see him like this. "Don't you dare say that again. I don't ever want to hear you say that again, do you understand me, Naruto-kun?" screamed out Yuki with such a ferocity that it shocked Naruto. Naruto's face was covered by his bangs, giving him an air of depression and self-loathing. But wouldn't it be easier for you if I were gone? You would be free instead of being stuck inside of a person like me," whispered out Naruto so quietly that Yuki was only able to have heard it due to her being so close to him. Yuki grabbed his shoulders and made him look at her. Ice Blue met Ice Blue in a stare-off. One filled with pain and uncertainty while the other filled with understanding and love. "Maybe it would be easier, but don't ever think that it would be better for me, Yubaka. It would be hell knowing that you were forever gone from my life. You are not trash, you are the one who will change this world. You are the one that will bring this world to its knees. I know this because I love you, Naruto-kun." With that said, Yuki did something that she thought that she would never have had the chance of doing. She kissed Naruto on the lips, hoping he felt the same way for her. Does she really mean it? Could she really love me as well? I never thought I could be so lucky. After a few moments of shock, and just as Yuki separated from the kiss, disheartened, Naruto brought her back in for another kiss, which caused Yuki's eyes to widen in shock this time. Her heart was exploding in a frenzy of emotions that she had never felt before and couldn't begin to describe. However, it was a feeling that she loved and wanted to continue to be able to feel it. When they finally released the kiss, both had a glazed look over their eyes with a look of pure bliss etched on their faces. The next day, "Feeling better, Naruto-kun?" asked a rather happy Vixen. "Yay, a lot better now thanks to you, my beautiful Vixen. So it's Naruto-kun now, is it?" questioned Naruto with a smirk on his face. Yuki's only response was a blush that made it seem like her entire body was covered by it. Shush shush, shut up baka, was all she was able to manage out with a cute pout that made her seem like a child. Hee oh, and Yukiheim, there has been a change in plans. We're not just gonna leave this pathetic village. We will come back and raze it to the ground. We will make them all pay for what they have done to us. We will completely break their souls and bodies, and we won't stop until every single person WHO has ever wronged us is dead at our feet," declared Naruto with a dark smirk on his face and with such a ferocity that it sent goosebumps down his vixen's spine. With that, they began their plan, and Naruto's training was raised to new levels of intensity so that he would be unstoppable when the time came for him to show Konoha why you don't anger the alpha wolf. Flashback no Jutsu Kai. Well, you're just going to have to deal with that yourself. At least until I turn 15 so that I can properly mark you as mine and nobody else's," declared Naruto with a perverted grin on his face. What Naruto means about marking Yuki is that when demons find a mate, in order to ensure that the mate does not become unfaithful and does get taken away from them, the two partners bite each other's neck, leaving behind a mark unique to that one person. The mark will bind the two for life and would make it so that the two partners would have a sort of mental link, as well as being able to sense where one another is and what the other is feeling. Once Naruto turns 15, he will become the next Juubi and will be able to mark Yuki as his mate and vice versa. "Oh, you just love teasing me, don't you, Naruto? You big meanie," whined Yuki with a childish tone of voice. In reality, she was just fantasizing all the ways she would be able to relieve herself once Naruto turns 15. Just the thought of it caused her to become more drenched than before, which Naruto noticed and decided to capitalize on. Are you perhaps fantasizing again, Yukiheim? You sure are quite the pervert if you got that drenched by just your fantasies," taunted Naruto with a perverted blush on his face. Of course, Yuki at this point blushed so hard that it would put Hinata to shame and decided to cut off the mental link. Seeing as how he wouldn't be able to talk to Yuki for a while, since she was currently relieving herself of some stress, which could take hours before she finished, Naruto decided to do the one thing he could that particular morning. Go the Uzumaki Namikaze compound and wait for the right moment to escape. He could easily escape at any moment, but he wanted to make sure to make those Konoha trash suffer. The last anyone would have seen would have been Naruto disappear in a flash of silver. Namikaze Uzumaki compound. Currently in the compound, no one except Naruto was awake due to it being 5 in the morning. Which was a good thing for Naruto, since he accidentally flashed himself into the middle of the living room instead of his room. Yes, Naruto knows the Hiraishin as well as the Rasengan. He may hate his father with a burning passion, but he would still acknowledge the man's technique's usefulness. The reason why his was silver was because the color of the flash was created by the user's hair color. Since Naruto's natural hair color was silver, the flash became silver in color. Realizing his mistake, Naruto decided to fly up the stairs and enter his room without so much as making a sound. By fly, I mean that Naruto is able to fly through his godly control over the wind. Thanks to such masterful control, Naruto is able to fly at speeds exceeding speeds of Mach 24 with no noise whatsoever. Once entering his room, he took off his dirty clothes, threw them into his closet, jumped into bed and fell asleep. A few hours later, it was now 9 in the morning, and Namikaze Minato along with his wife Kushina and daughter Hikari were in the dining room enjoying a delicious breakfast cooked by Kushina. They were currently talking about Hikari's birthday party. "So Hikari-chan, are you ready for your big day?" asked a very happy pair of parents. Why were they so happy? Well, now that Hikari was old enough, she could sign one of her godparents' summoning contracts. Minato was hoping that she would choose the toads, while Kushina hoped that she would choose the slugs. "Totally, today's gonna be great, Datbayo," came the generic response from their daughter. However, as soon as she said, her smile seemed to lessen a bit before asking something. Do you think we'll celebrate with Ni-chan as well?" she asked silently, hoping that she would finally be able to spend some time with her precious Ni-chan. You see, as the years went by, Hikari's affection for her older brother never wavered and only grew as time went on. It was only recently that she realized that her feelings for her brother went beyond sibling love. She had a crush on her dear brother, which she never told anyone in fear of being judged for it. But hopefully maybe she would be able to change that soon and finally tell her Ni-chan how she feels, and maybe he'll feel the same way for her. Karma's a bitch. It was at that moment that the parents remembered about their only son for the first time in years. When they realized that they had forgotten about him completely caused to feel a great amount of guilt inside them. They looked at each other and silently agreed to talk about Naruto later that day before responding Hikari's question. "Oh, of course, Hikari-chan, just wait for him to come down and you can ask him," replied Kushina with a smile that reeked of guilt. So with that said, the family waited for Naruto to come down before continuing with their breakfast, except for Kushina, since she still had to make Naruto's breakfast since she forgot to do so, which caused her to feel even more guilty. Luckily for her, she finished just as Naruto left his room and walked down the stairs. As Naruto walked down the stairs, he came upon a sight that shocked him to his very core. His parents and sister were waiting for him in the dining room with breakfast prepared. "Yukihime, has the fucking apocalypse arrived? These scum are actually noticing my existence. As if I care whether or not these bugs notice me," thought Naruto with such anger that Yuki thought he might just screw the plan and kill his family right there and then. Luckily, Naruto was a master at hiding his emotions, so while he was angry enough to murder everyone in the village on the inside, he was completely emotionless and calm on the outside. He completely ignored them and went into the kitchen and prepared his own breakfast, which astounded his family, since they didn't know he could cook for himself. Once he had finished cooking, he sat down at the open seat of the table, moved the food his mother had made for him, and begun to eat without so much as acknowledging their existence, just like they had done for the majority of his life. The awkward silence went on for about another 5 minutes before Kushina finally spoke up. "Sochi-kun, why didn't you eat the food I made for you?" asked rather timidly the mother of two to her only son. The answer she got was one she didn't expect. "Because you haven't made breakfast for me for 5 years. Hell, you haven't even made me anything to eat for 5 years, so why would you start now?" stated Naruto with a dark glare at the end. This only caused both Kushina and Minato to feel even worse about themselves for how they treated their son. Anyways, Ni-chan, would it be alright if you could, Anyo, celebrate our birthday together with as a family?" asked Hikari with her cute puppy dog eyes brimming with hope. However, the answer she got wasn't exactly the one she was looking for. "Family, please, tell me, when was the last time any of you treated me like family? Besides, for the last few years it's only been your birthday and not mine," replied Naruto. And with that response, he put his dishes away, left a clone to wash them, and left. His family didn't notice any of this since they were too busy processing his words. And the more they thought about, the worse they felt. Minato and Kushina felt like utter failures and were already silently crying, while Hikari was openly sobbing and went running up the stairs towards her room. One similar thought going through their heads: what kind of mother, father, sister am I if I didn't treat my own Sochi-kun, Ni-chan like family? With Naruto, while his family were suffering in guilt because of what they had done, Naruto was currently walking towards the forest of death under a genjutsu so that no one without the same amount of chakra control as would be able to see him. If they could, then they would be running away crying towards their mothers, who would do the same as soon as they saw him. Naruto's face was one of pure rage and hatred. His face was set into a dark scowl and his eyes were glowing with chakra that was a moments away from leaking out. Once he reached the forest of death, he dropped both the genjutsu and the demonic illusion and revealed what he really looked like. His hair was still silver but now reached a little bit past his shoulders. His 2 signature wolf ears rested on top of his head, and he now had 7 wolf tails moving around dangerously behind him. He was now 6 feet tall and his muscles were more compact so that he wouldn't look overly muscular, but due to his muscles being so compact, it would take a blade reinforced with a lot of chakra to be able to even give him a scratch. He now wore black baggy pants that had a ton of pockets on the sides and black combat boots. His long-sleeved shirt was also black with a picture of the Juubi on the front. He also wore a cloak similar to the one Minato wore, but instead it was silver with the kanji for Nidaime Juubi in what looked like blood. What changed the most over the years were his eyes. His right eye could now turn into the Juubi, while his left eye could only turn into the Rinnegan. The difference in the two being that the Juubi had 3 tomos per reign while the Rinnegan had none. Once he fully assimilated all of the Juubi's chakra, both of his eyes would have the Juubi. Unlike Nagato, he could actually turn his Juubi and Rinnegan off and on at will. Also, unlike Nagato, he wasn't a frail guy with metal rods coming out of his back. Maybe it was a personal preference, but moving on. Now that Naruto was no longer hiding under an illusion, he decided to do the one thing that was on his once he put up a barrier. Destroy. Which was what he did for a few hours before going back to the compound and preparing for the party. With the Namikaze Uzumaki family right after Naruto left, the entire compound felt desolate. It felt as though there was an aura of depression and self-loathing all around the compound. Which was pretty much true due to how the Namikaze Uzumaki family was feeling right now because of what Naruto had said. At first they didn't want to believe him, but the more they thought about it, the more undeniable his claims became. Kushina even went so far as to check all the photo albums and saw that since age 5 Naruto was mostly away from the family with depressed or angry look on his face, while he completely stopped appearing in picture at age 7. That's 5 years where they didn't even take a picture of him on his birthday or any other special occasions. Naruto had basically become a stranger to them, and it was all their fault. They couldn't even name a single thing he liked or disliked, and didn't even know his favorite color, but when they think of Hikari they know practically everything about her. Her favorite color, her likes and dislikes, and her dreams for the future. They felt like they had failed as parents. They ignored their only son, all because of a prophecy brought to them by the Toads. Flashback no Jutsu. 3 years after the Kyuubi incident, Minato Namikaze was currently working on the bane of all cages, paperwork. The damn creature that seemed to multiply every time he takes his eyes off it. He was praying to Kami-sama for some sort of distraction so that he may stop working on this demonic paperwork. Almost as Kami-sama had heard his request, a crash could be heard right outside his window. When he looked to see what it was his old sensei Jiraiya of the Sannin. Damn it Gaki, what kind of cage doesn't leave his window open so that ninja can enter at a moment's notice? Asked Jiraiya rather stupidly. A smart one that doesn't want to get killed by random ninja coming into her office. Deadpanned Minato with a sweat drop on his head. Anyway sensei, why are you here? I thought you would be looking for Orochimaru or doing research for your next book, or as Kushi-chan calls it, your next masterpiece. Yup, Kushina was the pervert in this relationship, but that didn't mean that Minato disapproved necessarily. Well, the thing is that the great Toad Sage has told me of a prophecy. The prophecy is that the child of the Flash will have the strength of the gods and will face many hardships which will decide whether they destroy the ninja world or save it from a great calamity. I believe this child is your daughter Hikari, stated the perverted Toad Sage. Are you sure that she's the child of prophecy, sensei? Positive, there is no doubt about it. Your daughter will change the world, and we have to make sure it is for the better, so it is best if you train her early so as to prepare her for the road ahead. Replied the Toad Sannin in order to erase all doubts from Minato's mind. Well then I guess I should go and tell Kushi-chan the good news. Later sensei, try not to get caught peeping. And with that the Yondaime flashed back to the compound. At the Namikaze Uzumaki compound, Kushina was currently cooking dinner for her family when suddenly she felt her husband flash into the compound. When she turned around to look at him, she saw a look on his face that could only be described as pure joy. Minato rushed and picked her up and twirled her around with a huge grin on his face while she giggled in happiness. Minato hadn't been this ecstatic since Hikari was born. Wow, what's got you so excited, Minato-kun? Asked Kashima with a happy smile on her face as her red hair swirled around her and her husband. So Minato carried her over to the living room and sat her down on the couch. He then proceeded to tell her everything that Jiraiya had told him earlier that day. To say that Kushina was happy and surprised would have been like saying that Tsunade's breasts were only a slightly larger than what is considered the average. I mean, honestly, those breasts were huge. Wow, looks like we'll need to start training Hikari-chan as soon as possible, and Naruto-kun's will have to wait for a while. After all, she'll need the training more than Naruto-kun, said Kushina, not knowing that her son was able to hear everything they were saying due to him being right outside the living room the entire time. This saddened him of course, but decided to simply accept it due to his trust in his parents. No one could have imagined how badly the prophecy would have affected Naruto's life, and also how much of a blessing it ended up being for him. After all, without his parents' foolish decision, he wouldn't have become the great Juubi no Okami, and he wouldn't have had Yuki as his mate. Flashback no Jutsu Kai. Remembering that moment caused guilt and pain to be felt in the hearts of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. If only they had been better parents to Naruto, then they would still be a happy and loving family. They felt like complete and utter failures. How could they have done this to their own flesh and blood? They even named him after the hero in Jiraiya's first book as a sort of sign of his future greatness, when in truth they had shunned him and disgraced his namesake with what they had done. Do you think that he can forgive us, Minato-kun?" asked a heartbroken Kushina. "I'm sure you will, especially if we offer to train him. If we train him in our specialties, I'm sure he'll forgive us and love us again," responded Minato with an air of reassurance around him. "Now let's get ourselves and Hikari ready for the party and hope that Naruto-kun comes back in time for the party. If he doesn't, then I'll send some Anbu to look for him." Later that night, it was now time for the party to start and all the guests have arrived. The Hyuga family, the Uchiha clan, the Sarutobi clan, the Inuzuka clan, the Yamanaka family, the Aburame clan, and the Akamichi clan were all present, along with the Nara clan, whose male members were trying to sleep while the wives, mothers were reaching for their frying pans that seemingly appeared out of nowhere. At first it seemed as though Naruto would not arrive and that Minato would have to send his Anbu to search for him, but at the last moment Naruto showed up from the depths of his room, almost as if he were there the entire time. He wore no fancy clothing, all he wore was some regular pair of pants and a red t-shirt. His parents frowned at his choice of clothing and asked why he wasn't wearing a male kimono for such an important event. His simple answer was, "How can I wear something that I do not possess?" This obviously caused their guilt to return full force. The party began with Hikari receiving a huge amount of presents from all the guests, while Naruto received none due to his existence being completely forgotten by the other clans, which when they noticed moments after felt rather guilty, just like Minato and Kushina decided to make it up to him the following day with presents that they would either make or buy for the boy. It's a shame they would never get the chance. It was time for the birthday girl and forgotten birthday boy to blow the candles and make a wish. It was at this point that Naruto decided to begin his escape, since all of his belongings were sealed into his seals that were inscribed onto parts of his body. However, just as he was about to leave the room, his parents did something unexpected and unplanned for. "Sochi-kun, where are you going? You and your sister have to blow out the candles and eat some cake. It is your birthday after all," asked Kushina Uzumaki, not knowing about Naruto's plan of escape, and also not knowing how much anger she had just awoken within Naruto. Naruto had frozen the moment he had heard those words, and the temperature in the room had fallen so low that even the clan heads start shivering in fear. "What is this horrible feeling? Why do I feel so afraid of what that boy is about to do or say?" were the thoughts shared by the clan heads, and the Anbu hiding inside the house has waited for the boy's answer. Naruto was turned away from them and his face was hidden behind his bangs, but if one were to see his face they would cower in fear and commit suicide as a way to avoid his wrath. Naruto's face was one of pure rage. His eyes had unconsciously switched to his Juubigan and Rinnegan, which were each glowing a metallic gray that simply oozed power. In the center of his eyes was a long black vertical slit that showed a primal rage, as if a wolf were to pounce you at any moment and you were unable to do anything but stand there and wait for death. He turned around and everyone heard Jiraiya gasp at the sight of his eyes and whisper out the word, "Rinnegan," in such surprise that most thought that he would have a heart attack there and then. "Don't you dare call me your son after everything you put me through. You are no family of mine." "I have no family," said Naruto, ending it with a yell, his eyes displaying pure hatred while his body was surrounded with silver chakra. Behind him was a sort of astral projection of a wolf with 10 tails flowing behind it, ready to pounce on any it deemed as its prey or enemy. Nobody moved or said anything after that for a few moments, until Naruto said one final thing. "It's time for me to be free from this hell. It's time for me to leave this place. It is time for the wolf to be released from its cage and show all why they once feared the wolf." With that said, Naruto disappeared using a shunshin of his own creation. His feet would begin to catch a flame, and then the flames would continue to encompass the rest of his body until the flames reached the top of his head. Once reaching the top of his head, his flame-covered body would shift into the head of a wolf, which would roar before disappearing from existence. However, the strangest part was the color of these flames. The flames were not red, blue, white, or black. The flames were silver. For a while no one moved, no one dared to say anything in fear of what they had just seen, until his words finally clicked in the minds of his family. Minato quickly flashed into his armory and grabbed his famous cloak and grabbed a few of his kunai, thinking that he wouldn't need many against his son. The same could be said for Kushina as she went to grab her fake sword so that she wouldn't accidentally hurt her son. And finally Hikari went to quickly change so that she could go with her parents to bring back her dear, Oni-chan. Unfortunately for them, they wouldn't be able to bring him back even if they were to go all out. Within a few seconds they were back in the living room, and the Yondaime ordered the Inuzuka, Uchiha, and Akamichi clan heads along with Jiraiya and Tsunade to help him get his son back to Konoha. Hopefully seeing who he has to fight, Naruto would come back peacefully and there would be no reason to injure him in any way. If only they knew that there would be no way for them to stop him now. A few miles outside of Konoha, Naruto was furious. How dare those trash try to regret their actions and try to fix their mistakes by simply allowing him to celebrate his birthday with his so-called family and their friends. He could have been in Kirigakure by now, but because of his anger he decided to go at a walking pace so as to allow them to catch up to him so that he could try to take out his pent-up anger on them. Thanks to his sensor abilities he could tell that the Konoha scum were closing on him much too slowly for his liking. At this rate it would take them 5 minutes to get to him before he proceeded to completely and utterly defeat them before finally leaving for Kiri. Why was he so intent on going to Kiri? Well, once he heard about the bloodline purges going on in that hidden village, he just couldn't let this go unpunished. These people were being unfairly killed off simply because they were different from other people. Simply because they had an advantage. They were like him and he'd be damned if he would let them suffer like he did without doing anything about it. It seemed as though they were about to arrive. It would be rather rude of him if he didn't give them a proper welcome, wouldn't it? Naruto turned around and activated his Rinnegan instead of his Juubigan. Seconds later the Naruto capture party had arrived. Sochi-kun come on and led Shinra Tensei, and with that everyone besides Naruto was sent flying away and crashing into trees before falling on the ground in pain. Naruto walked towards the group and stopped approximately 10 feet away from them before deciding to turn his attention towards Jiraiya of the Sannin. "How did you know the name of my eyes?" asked Naruto while releasing a lot of killing intent, which will now be known as Ki, leaving no room for anything other than complete and utter submission to him. 0010 of my students H had the Rinnegan, but he died along with his fellow companions who I also taught. Naruto, this is great news. You are the child of prophecy. Those eyes are said to be same eyes that the famed Rikudo Sennin wielded himself. Come back to the village and we'll train you. That's what you wanted, right? Right now Jiraiya was showing a face of happiness while in his mind he was fearing for the well-being of himself and everyone with him, including Konoha. If he has the Rinnegan, then with enough training he could easily destroy Konoha without so much as breaking a sweat. We have to convince him to come back at any cost or we're screwed, thought the terrified Sannin frantically. At the same time both of Naruto's parents were feeling ashamed of themselves for not knowing that their son was the child of prophecy and immediately thinking that their daughter was child of prophecy. Why? Because somewhere deep inside their minds they simply thought he wasn't good enough to be that powerful. And that thought brought them to this situation. Ni-chan, do you hear that? You'll be trained by Ka-chan and Tu-chan along with Ba-chan and Aro Sennin. We can finally train together like you always wanted, exclaimed Hikari with certainty, thinking that this was all her brother wanted and that he would come back home so that she could confess her feelings for him. Too bad it was too little too late. When Naruto heard this he decided that he wouldn't leave them here with only their bodies broken. No, he would leave their bodies broken, their hearts broken, and their minds broken. He would leave them wishing for death and leave them here to take their own lives as a sign to the village that no one would stop him from taking his revenge on them for all the pain they had caused him. You all think that that's enough to calm down all this rage and pain that I have felt for most of my life? Do you really think that will be enough to make me forget all the pain that those pathetic villagers have caused me? Did you even know how many times those bastards have tried to kill me in just a week, let alone my entire life? And you think that I would go back to that kind of life just so that I could receive some training from you pathetic humans? I have power you worms could only dream of. And now I will give you the privilege of witnessing this power firsthand. Tsukiyomi. And with that everyone in the group were now stuck within the world of Tsukiyomi. Each one of them woke up alone and noticed the red moon in the sky and also noticed Naruto standing right in front of them. However, when they saw what was behind him they nearly released the contents of their bowels. Behind Naruto was the Juubi no Okami with the Kyuubi no Kitsune standing right next to it with dark grins on their faces. For the next 72 hours you will experience all that I had to experience at the hands of those worthless villagers. And the best part is that each time you die only 1 second will have passed. Have fun, you Konoha scum, said Naruto with a dark smile on his face as he slowly disappeared from existence along with the Juubi and the Kyuubi. Once Naruto left the world of Tsukiyomi, he saw the bodies of all the Konoha scum in front of him go limp, yet they were still breathing. While they had been suffering for the 72 hours in Tsukiyomi, only 1 second had passed in the real world. Of course, when they woke up they would have to go through some extreme rehabilitation to be able to function properly and to be proved as sane. After all, they would at least need a Yamanaka to wipe a few of their memories in order for them to be approved as mentally stable. Not that Naruto is. Hell, if a Yamanaka were to enter his mind, he'd probably kill himself the moment he left his mind. After all, who needs sanity when you have insanity? Now that the Konoha nin were taken care of, Naruto finally started heading towards Kiri, albeit at a slower pace than he would have wanted, but still at around Sannin speeds. Why was he going so slow, you ask? Well, cause he was having an internal tongue battle with Yuki, so by going at only Sannin level speeds he could still pay somewhat attention to his surroundings while simultaneously going at a rather fast pace, all while most of his attention was in his mindscape. Unfortunately, he wasn't paying enough attention to notice the two people running towards him at Junin level speeds and ended up crashing into them and ending the tongue war with Yuki, who now wanted to kill the ones responsible for knocking her mate out of the mindscape. As soon as he saw the people he just crashed into, he simply couldn't believe the luck he had. It was like Lady Luck was making up for all the shit he had to go through as child by giving the best luck in the world. He had just crashed into the one person he was looking forward to meeting from Kiri, along with some random ice user. The reason why Naruto could tell this person was a Hyouten user was because of her smell. She smelled of ice and snow, almost like the smell of a nice winter breeze. That and the fact that she was forming ice senbons as he was smelling her. Yeah, that totally didn't have anything to do with it. Who are you and why have you intercepted us? Basically yelled out Zabuza Momochi, one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist and master of the silent killing style. As he was about to reach for his giant blade, he suddenly couldn't move. It was as though his entire body from the neck down was completely frozen. The same could be said for Haku. Ah, it seems you two finally noticed that you have been frozen. Took you long enough, and you call yourself one of the 7? Replied Naruto, who was doing his absolute best not go and ask Zabuza for an autograph. After this person was the one who murdered his entire graduating class just for fun. This guy would have been his hero if Naruto wasn't a primordial god. After all, according to Yuki, it would be unbecoming for a god to have someone they viewed as an idol. How do you have this bloodline? I thought I was the last Yuki, exclaimed Haku, who suddenly felt extremely ecstatic to be meeting a possible family member. Well, I'm sorry to say, but you probably are the last Yuki. You see, my bloodline doesn't come from my parents but rather from who I am and what I will become. So no, I am not another Yuki, but that does not mean that I cannot help you with your Hyouten abilities. Replied Naruto with a true smile. Not the dark or cruel smirks he gave to his enemies as they suffered, but a true smile that held warmth and happiness in it that comforted those that were lucky enough to witness it. You still haven't told us who you are, yelled out Zabuza rather impatiently. Well, seeing as how you're both from Kiri and one of you is a bloodline user, I can safely assume that you are both on the side of the rebels, am I correct? After receiving 2 nods, he continued. Well, my name is Naruto Okami, formerly known as Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, and I have come to help you rebels in killing the current Mizukage. For a few seconds both Kiri nin stared at Naruto as though he had grown a second head and started laughing. Which Naruto expected, but was still slightly surprised that they laughed at him. He then did the only natural thing one does in an anime if someone laughs at you. Roll yourself up into a ball and have a cloud of depression hang over you while releasing lightning strikes of despair pierce his heart. He recovered moments later when the laughing finally stopped and decided to simply show them some of his memories in order to prove his claim while leaving out a few of the more gruesome and perverted ones. Insert perverted giggle here. Once they viewed his memories, they immediately paled and started begging for forgiveness after seeing what he did to Yondaime Hokage. Who's laughing now? Thought Naruto with a cruel smile on his face. Now do you believe me? Asked Naruto with an innocent smile on his face. His only response was a pair of rapid nodding heads that seemed like they would be ripped off at the speed they were nodding. Now that we are properly introduced to one another, I believe it is time for me to unfreeze you both so that you can guide me to Kiri. Now that the two were unfrozen, Naruto could take notice of Haku's beautiful face and silky black hair. He had to fight back a blush. There was no way a god would blush from simply admiring a woman's face. It would unbecoming of him, and Yuki would never let him live it down. "Wow, Naruto, seems like you found your second mate. You sure do work fast, huh?" said Yuki rather teasingly. Since Naruto was going to become a god, it would only be fitting for him to have a harem. At least that's what Yuki said, and Yuki is never wrong. Of course, Naruto said that if he had to have a harem, then he would have no more than 4 mates, seeing as how it would be difficult to give them all a fair amount of quality if he had any more than that. "Maybe, but first she has to agree to sharing, and she has to fall in love with me first. I won't force her into anything, you know that," replied Naruto. "I know, Naruto, and I love that about you. Alright, I gotta go, Yuki. I'll see tonight in the mindscape to finish what we started," shot back Naruto with a seductive smirk and wink. Naruto walked towards Haku and kneeled in front her while grabbing her hand and giving it a kiss, causing Haku to have a full-body blush at the action. "My dear angel from above, may you grace one such as I with your undoubtedly beautiful name?" asked Naruto rather smoothly. It of course caused Haku's mind to completely elt at his words and was reduced to a stammering mess. My name is Haku Yuki, Naruto-kun," replied Haku without noticing she added the kun to his name until it was too late. At this point, Zabuza's fatherly instincts kicked in. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing? Get your hands off my daughter," exclaimed Zabuza with a rage only a father figure could possess. Without waiting for a response, he grabbed his sword and started trying to kill Naruto, while Haku just stood there in daze, unable to trust her legs quite yet with being able to walk and not trusting her voice to talk without stuttering. And Naruto was just avoiding the attacks while feeling a little fear from Zabuza's ki. This lasted for a little while before the group of now 3 started heading towards Kiri once again. Of course, this happened several times along the way, but nonetheless they still headed towards Kiri with quite a few delays. It has been 3 days since Naruto literally crashed in Zabuza Momochi along with his beautiful apprentice, adopted daughter who prefers to go by Haku Momochi rather than Haku Yuki. Not that Naruto minds. Although the overprotective father figure of hers he could do without, but hey, you win some and you lose some. He was already planning on getting Zabuza distracted with a random Kirikou no Ichi so as to have enough time for at least one date with Haku to see whether or not they can make it work. However, even though it's been 3 whole days since that occurrence, and they were still at least another 2 days until they reach Kiri. Why were they going so slow? The answer to that is due to Naruto being a primordial god. His stamina was virtually bottomless. Due to some techniques he has developed, he can reach hidden villages that were halfway across the elemental nations within seconds, but that took at least 3 taels worth of chakra for each person he transported with that technique, including himself. So at his level of chakra control and amount of chakra taels, he just wouldn't be able to use that technique with the 2 accompanying him. So they were limited to moving at the speed of low-level Junins due to Haku only being able to keep that speed constantly for hours at a time before being unable to continue. This of course caused them to have to stop at least twice a day before making camp for the night, which always had Naruto as the lookout while the other 2 slept. He'd never wake them up for their shift since he didn't feel tired or sleepy. The reason for this all ties back to him being the Juubi. Due to the excessive amount of chakra and small body in Biju terms, the energy in his body that is produced is much higher than the amount that is being used, so in order to remedy this, Naruto is able to go without sleep for about 2 weeks before he needs to sleep. Even then he would only about 8 to 10 hours of sleep before being ready to go for another 2 weeks. This would different if he was in his Biju form, but due to its rather inconvenient size he rarely uses it, thus causing his lack of sleep. Meaning that for about 96 hours straight Narita has been awake, and for 72 of those hours he was extremely bored. An extremely bored Naruto is not something you ever want to meet, and these upcoming bandits will be an example why. "We have been running for 9 hours straight now, Naruto-kun. Could we please take a break?" pleaded the exhausted Haku, who looked completely exhausted. Zabuza wasn't much better off, but his pride got in the way of him saying so. Fine. Geez, you humans can be so slow and you tire so easily. I need so entertainment, or I'm gonna kill both of you just to alleviate my boredom. And then I'll just bring you 2 back to life just so that I can do it all over again," yelled a frustrated Naruto. Yuki was trying to calm him down, but there was only so much kissing could do. Naruto needed to kill something, and a lot of it too. Now that Naruto had allowed them to rest, Haku and Zabuza were resting on a tree while taking their time drinking some water along with some bear meat. The poor bear never saw Naruto coming. One minute it was eating a deer and the next second it had been brutally cut into perfectly square 1-inch pieces while simultaneously cooked to a well-done temperature. How Naruto did it the two didn't know, but when they asked him he only said, "Nothing escapes the hunger of an Okami, wolf." They were suddenly snapped out of their thoughts when they heard bandits moving below them. There seemed to be at least 100 of them, with about 30 of them having Chunin-level chakra reserves at most, while the rest were civilian-level reserves. From their looks you could that they were bandits. Haku and Zabuza started feeling a bit wary. Not from the bandits but from the look on Naruto's face. He was smiling with an insane grin on his face. That smile nearly made them shit themselves right then and there. They started to pray for the poor bandits, hoping their deaths were quick once they heard Naruto's words. "Finally some entertainment. You two stay here, I'll go give our guests a warm welcome," stated Naruto with an insane grin that would make the Joker proud. He jumped off his branch and slowly descended in front of the bandits below. When the bandits noticed him they saw a kid no older than 12 and immediately thought, easy pickings. That is until Naruto pulled out two identical weapons. These weapons would give him a moniker that would strike fear into the hearts of the living. In each hand he held a miniature scythe with brown handles wrapped in loose black wrappings that were large enough for one hand to wield each. The blade itself reached from his wrist to his elbow. The blade itself was made of a pure black metal with a metal wolf skull attached to part of the handle and reaching to about the middle of the blade. Think the scythe from Darksiders 2 but with the slight alterations mentioned. You bandits are lucky. You will be able to die at hands of these blades. Their names are the Shi no Okami no Sume, and it is time for the wolf to feast upon its prey. With that said, Naruto charged at the closest bandit and faster than the eye could follow Naruto cut of all of the man's limbs including the head. At that moment the rest of the bandits realized they had just signed their death warrants. All they could do was try to run away from this monster. Of course they didn't get far. One by one they fell within a matter of seconds. Some were killed instantly while others were left to bleed out from where they were missing their limbs. Naruto jumped from one bandit to the next, all with a smile on his face. He was completely covered in blood and it seemed as though he enjoyed it. Now there were only 25 bandits left and they all decided to at least try to take him down with them. They thought that since they outnumbered him they could tail him on. The reason why they didn't think of this earlier was because their fight or flight response immediately kicked into flight. "If we had to die here today then we'll at least take you down with us, you demon," yelled out a random bandit. "A demon you say? Why thank you for the compliment," said Naruto without a hint of sarcasm. He was being completely honest. He was a demon and he was glad that they noticed it. "Thanks to that compliment I think I'll let you live." Then Naruto started charging up his scythes with chakra, causing them to releasing a kind of black smoke. Naruto then sliced the air with each of them forming an X in the air. This launched out a black X-shaped wave of energy to fly towards the bandits. A few of them were quick enough to dodge the attack but 10 of them were at least cut by it. At first they thought nothing of their wounds until they saw their flesh beginning to rot away and it was spreading across their bodies. They started to age away until they were nothing more than dust blowing through the air. The remaining bandits were horrified at the way their comrades had fallen. It was as if that wave of energy was filled with the essence of death. Like it? I call it Shi no Nami. This technique requires no hand signs. All it requires me to do is release my Yuki into blade and slice at the air, instantly creating a wave of death. The shape of the wave can be whatever I wish it to be. I can even change its shape while it's moving towards an enemy," exclaimed Naruto with a sadistic smirk on his face. "I'll leave you trash alive just so that you may tell the world of what happened today. Tell them of what you witnessed here today and spread your fear into their hearts so that they know why all humans feared the dark. They feared the dark because of what thrives in it, and the only thing that thrives in the dark is death," exclaimed Naruto with his voice becoming influenced by his Yuki. "WW what are you?" asked the same bandit that called him a demon. "Call me the Shi no Okami," and with that Naruto disappeared from their sight and reappeared next to Zabuza and Haku. Once the bandits thought he was gone they ran as fast as they could towards the nearest village. While their bodies were moving, they themselves were unconscious, moving only because of their fear of the one that could have killed them without a care in the world. In fear of the Shi no Okami. Back with Naruto, Zabuza, and Haku. Kid, I have never been more proud of someone I just met. The way you killed those bandits was simply breathtaking, and the way you made them scream like little girls has told one thing. And that is that you should become my apprentice. I will teach you the way of silent killing. This way your enemy won't be able to see you or hear while you take out their allies. Exclaimed Zabuza with such joy that one might think he might actually hug the blonde. Of course his pride stopped him. After all, a grown man hugging a 12-year-old boy? We already have enough pedophiles in the world, thank you very much. Otogakure. Achu. Are you alright, Orochimaru-sama? Asked Kabuto. I'm fine. Someone was probably talking about my unending greatness and intelligence. Stated the well-known pedophile with an arrogant smirk. Oh, would you look at the time. It's time for me to act all depressed about not becoming Hokage and forming plans that are resulted from a complete overreaction. Back with Naruto and the gang. Sure, why not? This way those pathetic worms will have more reason to fear me. Anyways, we better get moving, I would rather not waste any more time. And with that they started moving once more, hoping to reach Kiri by tomorrow afternoon. Of course there may have been some playful flirting along the way, accompanied by some overprotective fatherly anger trying to justify the killing of said flirter. Although Haku returned the flirting, it seemed as though Zabuza turned a blind eye when it came to whatever she did. Just like the majority of fathers with daughters. Around the world of fanfiction and real life. Achu. At that moment the entire planet shook with the ferocity of the amount of sneezes that went off simultaneously. It was as if an earthquake of a level 9 magnitude went off over the entire world at the same moment. For days after, the entire world thought that it was the beginning of the end. After a couple of weeks of investigation, the scientists chalked this phenomenon to up some random nature shit. Their exact words were, "We don't know what caused this, nature is fucking weird." Back in the Elemental Nations, Konoha, about 1 week after Naruto's escape from the village. Currently everyone from the Naruto retrieval group were resting in the hospital. All of them had already recovered from their physical wounds but had yet to wake up. Currently each and every one of them were lying on beds and connected to a machine that displayed their heart rate and blood pressure. Laid out on the beds were the following people in the following order. Fugaku Uchiha, Sume Inuzuka, Choza Akamichi, Jiraiya, Tsunade Senju, Minato Namikaze, Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, and Hikari Uzumaki Namikaze. Their family and friends were resting beside their beds waiting for them to wake up. Makoto Uchiha, Itachi Uchiha, and Sayuri Uchiha, Femsasuke, were standing by both Fugaku's bed and Kushina Uzumaki's bed as well as Hikari's bed. Itachi was by his father while Makoto was by her best friend and Sayuri was beside her friend. You all know what Makoto and Itachi look like, but you don't know what Sayuri looks like. Sayuri is about the same height as Hikari with long black hair just like her mother. She had kind black eyes that were filled with sorrow. She wore a loose-fitting black sweater with some black anbu pants that were taped off at the ankles. She wore standard ninja footwear. On the back of the sweater was a large version of the Uchiha clan symbol. But the thing that stood out was the necklace she was wearing. The necklace was made from a beautiful black diamond that was shaped into the head of a wolf with the kanji for 10 on its forehead. The sorrow in her eyes was not just for her friend, but it was mostly for the one that she considered almost like family. She missed Naruto and was greatly affected by his sudden leaving. She could clearly remember the first time she met him and the time he first told her the truth behind Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. She also remembered the greatest mistake her friend Hikari had made when they were children. She was sure that Naruto was making sure that Hikari was reliving that moment in order to make her know why he hated her as well. Flashback no Jutsu. 8 years after the Kyuubi incident, Hikari was currently hanging out with all of her friends, which mainly consisted of the future clan heirs. Her friends are as follows: Kiba Inuzuka, Choji Akamichi, Ino Yamanaka, Shino Aburame, Hinata and Neji Hyuga, Shikamaru Nara, and Sayuri Uchiha. They were all hanging out in the park by the playground. Currently they were all playing tag. Seeing as how Shikamaru was the laziest fucker even by Nara standards, he decided to use his considerable intelligence to hide somewhere where he could just doze off. His hiding place was pure genius that no one other than him would have thought of. He climbed up a tree and slept on one of the branches, which is where one could find him right now. Fortunately for him, the others of the group were unable to find him since they didn't think of looking up. That is what would have been true if these group of friends weren't from ninja-born families. Since they had all started training since they were young, well, younger than they were now, they could at least walk up perpendicular surfaces using chakra. Which is how Shikamaru was quickly found by Shino, who then after tagging him disappeared in swarm of insects. Yup, Shino has advanced further in the ninja arts than his fellow peers. Sayuri was at the edge of the park hiding from the rest of the group when she saw a blonde boy who was around her age. He was all alone reading some sort of book. There were no parents or family members of any kind anywhere near him. He wore civilian-type clothing. He had on a blood-red t-shirt with a pair of black shorts with a burnt orange stripe going down the side. As she moved closer towards him, she could see that he had the bluest eyes she had ever seen. It was as though she was staring at an ocean of sapphire filled with pain and loneliness. All she wanted to do was hold him and tell him that everything would be all right and that she would be there for him. She took a few more steps forward and finally noticed that his attention was no longer on his book but on her. "Is there something you need from me, Uchiha-san?" asked the unknown boy with an almost dead tone. His voice sent chills up her spine. Though his voice may sound dead to anyone else, she could tell he was faking it. Because underneath all that pain and loneliness there was a sort of feral power she was able to see. It intrigued her to say the least. "Why are you all alone?" she asked, wondering if she really wanted to know the answer to that question. However, she couldn't help herself from asking. "Because no one wants to waste their time on me. Not even my own family, if you could even call them that," replied the young boy. She involuntarily flinched when she heard his words. "Why is that?" asked Sayuri. She couldn't help herself from wanting to know more about this boy's pain so that she could be able to comfort him. She knew this must be hurting him, but she felt as though she could help him. "Because to them I'm not nearly as important as my twin sister. I'll always be the mistake," stated the boy. After that, Sayuri didn't say anything. She didn't know what she could say. This boy, the same age as her, has gone through so much pain and yet somehow still manages to get through the day. Once she snapped out of her inner thoughts of pity for the boy, she noticed that he had disappeared. Little did she know that she would see him again later that same day. Time skip. Same day, evening at the Uchiha clan compound. The Uchiha clan was currently preparing for Sayuri-sama's surprise birthday party. They had started when she had left to go play with her friends and were putting the finishing touches. The guests had already arrived and were only waiting for Sayuri to arrive from walking in the park with her parents and dear Oni-chan. All of the families were there. The Inazukas, the Akamichi, the Aburame, the Yamanaka, the Hyuga, the Nara, and the Namakazes were present. Well, most of the Namakazes. Naruto was missing from the group, not that anyone noticed as usual. A few moments later, the birthday girl arrived with a thoughtful look on her face. What was taking up most of her attention? Well, she simply couldn't stop thinking about the young boy she had met today. He took up most of her thoughts. Fortunately, not to the point of a fangirl, but a rather close second. Sayuri will not be a fangirl. No fucking exceptions. She was taken out of her thoughts by her dear Oni-chan, who told her to go ahead and open the door to their backyard. When she did as she was told, she bombarded with a loud chant of "Happy Birthday." She had completely forgotten it was her birthday with the occurrences that had chosen to happen that particular day. For a few hours she received her presents, played with her friends, and thanked everyone for their participation. Finally came the time for her to blow the candles and make a wish. That is when her thoughts returned to that boy she met earlier. "I wish that that boy and I could be friends." And with that final thought she blew away her candles. After eating a rather excessive amount of cake that can only be possible on special occasions such as these, she decided to sneak away and walk towards the Uchiha Gardens. She loved the gardens where she was surrounded by the beautiful flow of nature. For some reason she just felt so relaxed whenever she was surrounded by nature. Hint hint. When she finally reached the gardens, she saw that the lights were on, which wasn't strange since the lights were usually on at this time in case anyone wanted to go for a stroll through the gardens. What caught her attention was the blonde hair she saw sticking out behind one of the bushes. When she went around to see who it was, she saw the same boy she had met with earlier that day. And he was still reading that same book. "It's you," she gasped. She didn't expect to see him here. Usually only members from clans attend her birthday parties. Could that be why he's here? Is he a clan heir? But I've never seen him before today. Just who are you, Blondie? Yes, it is me, the boy stated with an emotionless tone, though she could tell that this time his words held some warmth in them. What are you doing here? Are you one of the clan heirs? Asked Sayuri rather bluntly, but then again she never was good with being subtle. I am from one of the clans, but I am not heir. And to answer your next question, the clan I hail from is the Namikaze clan. Answered the now identified Namikaze. But the only Namikaze I know of is Hikari, so how can you be a Namikaze? Asked the now confused Sayuri. If you remember our earlier conversation, you'd be able to deduce that Hikari is my sibling. My twin to be exact. I am here because I wanted to be here, not because I was forced to. You intrigue me, Uchiha-san. Just as I do you. Stated the young Namikaze with a small smile. It was so small that she could barely see T, but she did not miss it. My name's not Uchiha-san. My name is Sayuri, Sayuri Uchiha. What's yours? Naruto. Nice to meet you, Naruto-kun. Let's be friends. Stated Sayuri with a megawatt smile on face, silently hoping her wish would come true. Naruto decided that he could at least give her a chance. After all, she was one of the first to notice his existence. Sure, and happy birthday, Sayuri, said Naruto with a slightly larger smile and held out a small dark blue rectangular box for Sayuri. What's this? She asked innocently. I believe it is customary for a friend to give another friend a gift on their birthday. Stated Naruto with a small grin on his face. It seemed as though he pulled it out of thin air. Cough cough, subite no mono no sozo, cough cough, creation of all things. When she opened the box, she saw the most beautiful necklace in existence. The necklace was made of black diamond with interlocking chains that connected to a wolf's head with the kanji for 10 on the forehead. It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Naruto-kun, she said with a beautiful smile as a small tear escaped her eye. And that was how their friendship was born, but would soon be tested to see if she was truly worth his trust. Time skip. A week later. It's been 1 week since Sayuri gained a bit of Naruto's trust, and usually for each day after then they would meet each other at the park, and Naruto would usually have a book with him and Sayuri would be wearing the necklace. She never took it off. Currently they were both sitting down under a tree at the edge of the park. The good thing about being at that edge of the park is that it's by the huge wall surrounding the village, so they are able to interact with each other without Naruto receiving justified punishments from the villagers. Luckily Sayuri was not around when these beatings happened, and by happened I mean when the villagers charged at Naruto and then fell under his genjutsu. If she did witness it, then she would notice his dojutsu. Anyway, right now Naruto was reading his book while Sayuri was sleeping on his shoulder. She was exhausted from training with her Oni-chan, since she doesn't get the chance very often, so they trained to the point of her passing out the moment she sat down next to Naruto. This was the site that Hikari had arrived in on when she went looking for Sayuri. In this entire week that Sayuri had been with Naruto, she was almost ignoring all of her other friends, including her best friend Hikari. So Hikari was annoyed that Sayuri was ignoring her, so she went to look for her so that she could get her to hang out with her again. Of course she did this with a slightly bratty attitude, so she may go overboard to get the things she wants only to lose some of the things she needs. You never know what you got until it's gone. When she saw her best friend ignoring her for her weak brother, she became enraged and decided to confront them about Sayuri abandoning her. Sayuri-chan, what are you doing hanging out with him? Yelled out Hikari. Her face was flushed red with justified anger. What are you doing here, Hikari-chan? Asked a sleepy Sayuri who looked like she would doze off once again in a few seconds. I'm here because you've been ignoring me and all your other friends for the past week. So why are you hanging out with that loser instead of with your real friends? Exclaimed the bratty Namikaze. First of all, stop yelling like a Haruno before we all go deaf. Secondly, why shouldn't I hang out with Naruto-kun? Asked Sayuri, not understanding why Hikari was acting like this. Because he's a loser. Tu-chan and Ka-chan are training me and not him, meaning I'm better than him. You shouldn't hang out with losers like him. Yelled Hikari frantically, not understanding why Sayuri was being so difficult. After all, she was obviously better than her brother, so why should he be chosen instead of her? Through all of this, Naruto is just sitting there reading his book, wondering what Sayuri is going to do. Will she ignore his existence like everyone else, or will she stay by his side as a true friend? He honestly thought she would do the former, so imagine his surprise when she said the following. How could you talk that way about your own family? What kind of sister are you? From now on I don't want anything to do with you. You are not the kind of person I would want as a friend. Stated Sayuri, who then proceeded to grab the dumbfounded Naruto by the arm and began to drag him towards the Uchiha clan compound. All the while Hikari just sold there dumbfounded at what her now ex-best friend had said to her. Uchiha clan compound. They had just arrived at the compound and Sayuri had apparently decided to take him to the place where he gave her the necklace. Luckily for them there was no one around. They sat down and took their time catching their breaths. More like Sayuri trying to catch her breath while Naruto was staring at her as though she had grown a second head. Why did you say those things back there? Asked Naruto with utter confusion. What do you mean? Responded Sayuri with another question. Why did you defend me back there? Wouldn't it have been better for you to have Hikari as a friend instead of some loser like me? Asked Naruto once again. Because your situation is somewhat similar to mine except on a more extreme level. Sama says he loves me but I can't help but feel like I'm not good enough for him. My Oni-chan tells me I'm just imagining it but he doesn't know what it's like to be second best. To have your requests for training to be ignored and to not have much expected from you. And besides family should love each other not treat them like they're trash. Stated Sayuri. When she turned to look towards Naruto she noticed something. He was reading his book but she could see a small tear going down the side of his cheek. Thank you, Sayuri-chan, said Naruto with a true smile on his face. It seemed as though he had been smiling more often when she was around. Adding Chan to the end of her name caused Sayuri to blush and turn her head away in an effort to hide it. No problem Naruto-kun. Hey, how about I introduce you to my family since yours apparently sucks. At those words Naruto couldn't help but laugh. How long had it been since he had laughed like this? So with that done they decided to go to meet her family. Time skip. 20 minutes later. Right now Naruto was sitting in Sayuri's living room while sweating bullets. Why? Because he was in a house filled with people just staring at him waiting for him to do something. He could deal with being ignored and he could deal with being hated but he had no idea what to do when he had 3 people simply staring at him acknowledging his existence. Of course one of those stares was filled with fatherly overprotective anger due to Sayuri holding his hand. Who are you and why are you holding my baby's hand? Asked Fugaku in a dangerous tone with his Sharingan activated. Make sure you answer carefully. Sayuri was surprised at how overprotected her father was being that she couldn't help but smile with a little bit of satisfaction. Shit, this guy's really protective of his daughter. With my kind of luck he'll probably hate me like the rest of this damned village. My name's Naruto, sir. I'm a friend of your daughter. And just like that Fugaku's attitude did a complete 180 and he was all smiles. Ah, that's perfectly fine then. You have my approval, declared the Uchiha clan head with a meta guy level smile and thumbs up. Needless to say everyone in the room moved a minimum of another 2 feet away from him in fear of catching the MG disease. Somewhere in Konoha, Youthchoo, Sugoi Gai Sensei, even your sneezes are full of youth, yelled what could only be described as a mini guy with eyebrow that were just as bushy as his sensei's. Youth, back with the non-MGs in the Uchiha clan compound. Dear, I think you've been hanging out too much with the MGs, said Makoto with a feeling of foreboding with a horrible vision of the future if he were to continue training with them. At least he isn't wearing those horrible green skin-tight suits. Kami forbid, for if he did I might just have to kill him to save him from dishonor. Said Itachi in a completely serious tone along with his completely straight face accompanied a magical stick of Pocky sticking out of his. Yup, completely serious. Where the hell did that stick of Pocky come from? And why the hell is glowing? Asked everyone in the room simultaneously. Itachi simply shrugged his shoulders. Don't know, but it tastes like demon flesh. It's actually really disgusting. You could practically see the sweat drops forming on the heads of everyone else in the room. Well, moving on, Naruto, who are your parents? Asked Makoto in a kind voice that he has only ever heard from his mother when she was talking to his sister. Well, I guess you could say that I have no parents or family, said Naruto. After saying that he proceeded to tell the Uchida family about how he is treated at home and how he is treated by the villagers while leaving a few choice things out such as him knowing about Yuki and becoming a god, etc. Once he finished telling them his story, he was suddenly bombarded by a fast-moving Sayuri hugging him as if he would disappear if she were to let go. Tears were rolling down her face while she desperately tried to form coherent sentences. Makoto was also crying while feeling extremely angry at the woman she once considered to be a sister. Fugaku was shaking in rage as a few stray tears cascaded down his cheeks. His rage at his best friend could not even be described with words. Itachi was torn between contorting the poor boy and going off to at least relieve the Hokage of a few of his limbs. The only thing that stopped any of them from having a private audience with the Hokage and the rest of his family were Naruto's next words. "Is this what it's like to have a family? Is this what it's like to feel the love of a parent?" asked Naruto as tears went down his cheeks like a river. His voice was cracking due to how emotional he was feeling. His overshadowed by his bangs, which only made him seem more fragile. These people were the first humans to ever see him like this. Since only those whom Naruto trusts ever see this side of him. For this is when he's most vulnerable. The Uchiha's response was to simply hug the boy and comfort him in his brief moment of weakness. It seemed as though Naruto had finally found a family that he could call his own. That night Naruto didn't go back to Namikaze compound. That night Naruto finally knew what it was like to be a part of a family that actually wants your continued existence. Flashback no Jutsu Kai. Since then the Uchida family has always considered Naruto as one of their own. Now some would think that if this were true then he wouldn't have injured Fugaku or have trapped in hell of his own creation. Which is exactly why Naruto made sure not hit Fugaku too severely with the Shinra Tensei, and when he sent Fugaku into the world of Tsukiyomi he made sure nothing happened to him and simply placed him in a coma-like trance that would awaken him the same moment the others awakened. Which just so happened to be right now. Slowly, one by one each person started to awake from their comatose state. It was then when the effects of what Naruto had done them were revealed. Tsunade was looking around fearfully as though anyone in the room would be capable of ending her life then and there. Sume Inuzuka was frantically clawing at her face, muttering out incoherent ramblings. Choza Akamichi attempted suicide along with Jiraiya, who both kept on muttering that they would rather be dead than live with those memories, but were stopped by the Anbu within the room. Fugaku seemed as though his spirit was broken and remained unresponsive to the world around him. Genjutsu. However, the Yondaime and his family were the worst off. Minato had begun to create explosive seals with his chakra that were replicated throughout the entire village, throughout the homes of those who tried to kill his son. And one enormous one above Konoha. The seals were high-powered explosives that if they had gone off would have blown Konoha right off the map. While Kushina was providing him with the sufficient chakra to accomplish such a feat. Of course they were stopped before these explosives could go off by the Sandaime. One quick chop to each of their necks and they were out once more. Unfortunately for the family, the daughter was probably the worst off. Hikari had woken up, and when she saw everyone in the room she did the last thing anyone would think of. She fucking smiled. Everyone in the room slowly started to back away from her. Even Sayuri was scared at this point. What had Naruto done to her if she was smiling after being in Tsukiyomi for all this time? "Hey Sayuri-chan, why are we in the hospital and where is Ni-sama?" asked Hikari in an innocent voice as if nothing had happened to her. It was as if instead of being tortured like the others were something else happened, almost as though instead of pain and suffering she was give forgiveness. "Hikari, what are talking about? Don't you remember what happened a week ago?" asked Sayuri with confusion etched into her face. Did Naruto really decide to forgive her for everything she had done? For Naruto to forgive someone is rare, especially when that someone is somebody who contributed to his loneliness. "I remember Naruto Ni-sama leaving the party early, but that's it," said Hikari with complete honesty. Her eyes betrayed nothing and neither did her body language. She truly remembered nothing from after the party. However, Sayuri noticed that Hikari was calling Naruto Ni-sama now instead of Oni-chan. She would have to investigate later. Too bad they didn't ask about her memories from before the party, because then they would know exactly what Naruto had done to Hikari, and while it may have been good for her, it was in no way good for Minato or Kushina. Oh yay, they were fucked. Flashback no Jutsu. Hikari's time in Tsukiyomi. At first she suffered just like all the others that had looked into Naruto's except for Fugaku, but she didn't know that. She was forced to remember how she treated her brother when she was 8 years old. That was when she entered her bratty stage. She was forced to remember all the insults she said to her brother and all the times she tried to get Sayuri to stop being friends with him. It was heartbreaking for her to witness, but she could only imagine how her Oni-chan must have felt. I'm so sorry Oni-chan. This is all my fault. Please forgive me Oni-chan. I deserve any punishment you see fit. I'm so sorry, cried out Hikari as she tried desperately to end the images of pain assaulting her mind. She even went to the point of grabbing one of her kunai and attempting to slit her own throat until a hand came and stopped the blade. When she looked up, she noticed that the hand that saved her belonged to the one she was begging for forgiveness. Maybe I can trust you. After all, according to your memories, you didn't ignore me or deny my existence. I simply left before you could prove that you noticed my existence," said Naruto with a tone of honesty and understanding. "However, you will still need to prove your loyalty to me. Only then will I trust you." While what he said is true, he did leave a few fake memories for her in her mind to make sure she doesn't betray him. These memories would only activate in certain situations which are for Hikari's safety and Naruto's amusement. Except a few that he left in order to cause Hikari to begin to slowly distance herself from her family. Not able to trust her own voice, Hikari did the only thing that seemed right to do. Hug the life out of Naruto. "Thank you Naruto ni-sama." A dark grin formed on Naruto's face. "Perfect, the plan is moving along rather smoothly. Maybe things might even be moving ahead of schedule thanks to this." And with that, Naruto removed the memories of what happened here from her mind while leaving behind the suffix she now had for him, knowing that Sayuri would notice and figure it out in time. After all, she was a major part of his plans for Konoha. Flashback no Jutsu Kai. Timeskip. After many sessions with Inoichi. After some sessions with Inoichi, it seemed as though Minato and Kushina along with the other 5 ninjas were finally able to resume to their duties. Luckily for Minato, Hiruzen Sarutobi had been subbing in for him during his brief absence so that the civilian council could not take advantage of Minato's absence and attempt to gain more political power for themselves. He was able to prevent information of Naruto's escape from getting out, but who knows how long that would last. At least they couldn't brand him as a missing nin since he was still a civilian at the time of his escape. However, once Minato returned to work, his focus was not on the hellish paperwork in front of him but on more serious matter entirely. His son. How had he become so powerful? How had he gained those eyes? But more importantly, how had he and the rest of his family ignored him for so long? How was it that they had only noticed his existence once Hikari had pointed it out to them only a few weeks ago? And why was it that Hikari had only decided to point it out then instead of before? I should probably see Inoichi again and have him check my memories for evidence of some kind of outside intervention. After all, that is the only logical explanation for this. So with that final thought, Minato cancelled the rest of his appointments for the day and headed towards the torture and interrogation department. He needed answers and he would get them. At the T&I department a few minutes later, Minato had just arrived and was silently hoping that Inoichi wasn't busy with an important interrogation. If it wasn't important, then he'd just leave it to Anko or Ibiki to break the man or woman. Lucky for him, Inoichi was currently lying back in the relaxation room that is reserved for those who had just come back from an interrogation. "Hey Inoichi, got some time to spare?" asked Minato in a serious tone, which meant that at this moment Inoichi would have some time to spare for him whether he wanted to or not. "Of course Hokage-sama. What is it that you need from me?" asked the Yamanaka with an air of complete seriousness. If the Hokage was asking him for something, then he must have needed some memories to be revisited. And if he needed that, then this was bound to be important. "As you have probably already figured out, I need you to check some of my memories to see if you can find anything that would have caused to have neglected my son for this long," stated the Hokage, since this was no time to be subtle. "Of course Hokage-sama. If you would please sit down and tell how far back you want me to start searching." Knowing how far back he would need to start would help immensely and cut down how long it would take for him to find what he was asked to. "Begin at around the time of the Ki and work your way from there. But stay away from the bedroom, am I understood?" stated the middle-aged Kage with a blush at the end. "Oh, of course Hokage-sama." And with that, Inoichi entered Minato's mind. Inside Minato's mind was rather unique to say the least. His mind appeared to have the outward appearance of the Kage office, except instead of furniture there were numerous boxes filled with files. Luckily each file was dated so Inoichi was able to begin rather quickly. It wasn't until he had reached the file that contained the memories of the week after the KI that he noticed something off. He decided to dive in further in order to confirm his suspicions. Flashback no Jutsu. 1 week after the KI in the council chambers. Currently Minato was at a meeting with the clan heads, civilian council, and the elders. So far most of the meeting was taken up by the civilian side calling for the execution of the demon brat. Minato was rubbing his temples with his index and middle fingers trying to ward off the headache that was threatening to unleash itself. Shut up. The next person to even call my son a demon will have a kunai thrust into their brain before you could say Hokage. Am I understood? In fact, don't even speak, just nod in confirmation. I'd rather not hear your useless voices. Yelled out Minato in annoyance. Honestly, why the hell did they have a civilian council? The entire council nodded in understanding, though some did so more hesitantly than others. Danzo was the only one of the civilian council that did not see Naruto as the demon he held inside of him. No, he saw the young Jinchuruki for what he really was, to him. The boy was a weapon that would be perfect for his root program. He knew that the fool of a cage would never allow him to simply train the simply because he would be more loyal to Danzo than he would to him. So a more elaborate plan was needed. One that would end with Naruto going to root while Minato was none the wiser. Later in the Hokage's office. What is it that you need, Kaharu and Homura? Asked Minato. These were one of the few people on the council that were no longer ninja that Minato actually trusted. They were the old teammates of Sarutobi Hiruzen, so naturally he was introduced to them in his younger years and they were like mentors to him, just like Hiruzen was to him. Which is exactly what Danzo was counting on. If he were to have Minato sign something for him he would immediately suspect something, but if he were to be asked by those two then his plan would come to fruition. We need you to sign these documents which will allow for former root agents to have partners that would help them reintegrate to society and possibly return their emotions back to them at a quicker rate. If nothing else, this will at least be an interesting experiment. Answered the two elders, showing him the document to prove that there were no falsifications in what they had said. If one were to look closer like what Inoichi was doing in order for him and Minato to see the small seal that was under genjutsu that wouldn't be sensed if one weren't looking for it. After making sure that both he and Minato could replicate it through memory, he ended the jutsu and left Minato's mind. Flashback no Jutsu Kai. Back in the relaxation room located in the T&I building. Once they opened their eyes, Minato immediately grabbed a piece of paper and began to remake the seal he remembered seeing on that document. Once he finished, he took a few seconds to analyze and suddenly widened his eyes in horror, shock, and pure rage. This seal caused a low-powered genjutsu based off of the ones used by the Sharingan. The difference between the two, however, was how the matrix of the seal was organized. Due to how it was organized, this genjutsu would affect the first person it came in contact with and would slowly but surely affect the others said person came into contact with. This genjutsu was almost like an identity eraser, except it completely erased the existence of the target from your mind unless they were right in your face. The mind would then choose the best course of action to remove the target from the line of sight so that the existence would once again be ignored. It was ingenious, and it was what had caused Minato and Kushina along with most of Konoha's clans to ignore the boy's existence. There were only two ways to counteract this seal. One was to have a counter seal already placed on you, the other way was to have the dojutsu this seal was based off of. The Sharingan. Otherwise the seal would naturally wear off after around 12 years. He couldn't believe him. Two of the few people that had mentored him when he was young had betrayed his trust, and he could guess who the third one was. Danzo was the only one who would have the audacity to have done this. It was time for a few pests to be taken care of. Konoha's council chambers. The Hokage had called for a surprise meeting for just the civilian council and the elders. When they had all arrived, they had no idea what was going on and were wondering why the clan heads weren't present. Then finally the Hokage arrived, and that is when the temperature in the room dropped by a minimum of 20 degrees. His eyes were cold like ice and his body was tense, ready to strike at any moment. And strike he did. He flashed towards Danzo and placed a paralysis seal on his forehead, preventing him from moving, and then ordered the Anbu to arrest the civilian council and the elders for crimes against the Namikaze clan and the Hokage. Minato, what is the meaning of this? What crimes? Screeched out Kaharu with fear clearly etched on her face. Had he finally found out about the seal? If so, how? Danzo told them he'd never find out. Minato then explained to them all they had done against him and against his family. To say they were surprised was an understatement. Danzo was furious that he had decided to leave his rude bodyguards in their private facility under Konoha. It seemed as though he was becoming a little senile in his later years, and today he might pay the ultimate price for it. Koharu and Homura were trying to convince Minato that what they were doing was right by using Naruto's recent escape to their advantage. "Minato, we needed to do this for the sake of Konoha. What we did was all in the best interests of Konoha," desperately yelled out Koharu in an attempt to make Minato understand why they did this and not punish them for it. Of course her answer wasn't something she was hoping for. A regular kunai in between the eyes. The punishment for treachery is death. Now you two remaining elders think that what you did was for the good of Konoha. You idiots. If you had just let my son have a normal life, then he wouldn't have left Konoha. He wouldn't hate us and he would have been the best ninja this village has ever seen," yelled out Minato, panting after yelling out his anger towards them. "Naruto was the child of prophecy, but thanks to your idiocy we have not only lost him but we have made him into our enemy. Now all of you are to be publicly executed later today. Well, everyone except for you, Danzo. Can't afford to let you escape with you root agents, so I'll just kill you now." With that, Minato flashed towards Danzo and began his execution. He began by cutting off his right arm, then proceeded to cut him in half from his waist down. After that he threw the remaining upper body that was somehow still alive and threw it in the air, where it proceeded to explode in a shower of ink? Shit, this was a decoy. Anbu. I want two of you to take the remaining civilian council to the T&I building to see what we can get out of them before their executions later today. The rest of you get any other Anbu and Junins that are within Konoha's walls and have them meet me here immediately. And if I find out that either of you two have accepted bribes from the council for any reason whatsoever, you get the honor of joining them with their executions. Understood, yelled out Minato. Hi. A few moments later. Now that you're all here, it is time for your mission details. Danzo has proven himself traitor and we must eliminate him along with his rude subordinates. Each and every one of you will be carrying one of my signature Hiraishin kunai. You are to locate any root facilities you may find, and once you do find one you are to throw that kunai to summon me. I will then proceed to eliminate any threat that presents itself while you continue looking for Danzo. If you throw the kunai and I do not appear, it means that I am currently in combat against several root or I'm fighting Danzo himself. So make sure you throw the kunai somewhere you know T-cable, and that you throw it silently so that you are not discovered by the enemy. You then wait for either me or my wife to arrive. Am I understood? Explained Minato as he was handing each one of the Konoha nins one of his kunai. Kushina cannot perform the Hiraishin herself, but she is able to teleport to one of the kunais if Minato sends her there instead of going himself. Hi, responded all of the Konoha nin in the room. Alright. Now let's go cut off some parasitic roots. And with that they were gone while Minato and Kushina, imagine her in her Junin outfit, were sitting down. Once they were sure they were alone, they broke down crying. Even though they still hadn't neglected Naruto of their own free will, they still blamed themselves for this. If they had simply noticed the seal or the strange changes in their thoughts of Naruto, then this would have never happened. They just sat there waiting for their chance at revenge. And silently hoping that when they told Naruto this, when they next see him, that he would forgive them. If they ever see him again, that is. Back with Naruto just before arriving at Kiri. Kid, you are more fucked up in the head than I am. I'm so proud of you, stated Zabuza as he wiped a fake tear from his eye. Yup, they were a group of fucked up people and they wouldn't have it any other way. They noticed that there was movement all around them and they prepared for an attack. Well, Zabuza and Haku did. Naruto was still walking ahead while eating a random stick of Pocky that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. Hint hint. All of a sudden two ninjas revealed themselves. One had an eye patch over his left eye while wearing the standard Kiri colors and designs. He had short brown hair and seemed to be around 40 years old. The one next to him seemed to be around Naruto's age. He had a large sword strapped to his back. He wore the traditional Kiri uniform for someone his age. The noticeable feature were his teeth. They were sharp like Zabuza's, meaning he was one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Who are you and what are you doing here? Asked the elderly Kiri nin, not noticing the presence of Zabuza and Haku. Fortunately his younger companion did. Zabuza sensei, is that you? asked the unknown swordsman. Yay, it's me Chojuro. What's it been 7 years since I left to get some supplies and reinforcements? Asked Zabuza rhetorically with a hint of guilt. Yay, we all thought you were dead, including Mei-sama. Do you know how badly you hurt her when you didn't come back? Yelled out Chojuro with a rage since he saw their leader Mei as a sort of parent figure. I know, I'm sorry I didn't come back, but you'll be happy to know that I got us enough reinforcements to take out Yagura within the week. Responded Zabuza. Really, where are they? Are they camping somewhere behind you? Asked the elderly nin. Actually, you're holding your kunai to his neck right now, which I would advise removing if you value your continued existence, ninjin. Responded Naruto, who was silently eating his paeki throughout the entire conversation. The name's Naruto Okami at your service, and I'm here to take care of your turtle problem. Said Naruto with a dark grin on his face, which promised great poine and suffering to the one he was talking about with his masterful subtlety. Opening parenthesis. Yup, I'm the guy they brought to take out that ninja turtle problem you seem to have. Well, in complete honesty, we just crashed into each other and I told them about how strong I was and they took me here to help. Stated Naruto like he was talking about the weather. BB Nut, you're no older than I am. And you're shorter than Crash. If one were to look for Chojuro at this moment, they would find him head stuck in the ground with his body perfectly straight in a vertical position. Or as Naruto was describing it, like an ostrich preparing to be penetrated by a prisoner. Of course no one there knew what an ostrich was, so they merely chalked it up to his insanity. Look, if you don't believe us, then you can just ask Mei-chan to test him using whatever soldier she wants. Though I can't guarantee they will leave with all their limbs. Or their lives for that matter. You know what, just tell her that if she has any prisoners to just have them fight Naruto for their freedom. At least that way we can somewhat gauge his strength and Naruto will be able to calm his hunger for battle. Said Zabuza with a sweat drop at the end. Naruto called fighting or killing as sating his hunger, or in some occasions feeding it. Yay, Naruto was fucked up in the head, but what would you expect with all the shit he had to put up with thanks to the villagers? At least he was only insane when he was hungry. Another good thing was that Zabuza hadn't woken up yet and was placed inside his respective tent while the now identified Ao and Chojuro were taking the first shift. Naruto then picked up Haku in his arms, which caused her to release a very cute eep sound and then flash into their shared tent. Once they got there, Naruto laid Haku down and laid down behind her in a spooning position while wrapping his arms around her in a protective manner. Good night, my Kuroyuki-hime. Sleep well knowing that I am by your side. Said Naruto in a loving tone as he held one of the loves of his life. Good night, Naru-koi, know that I too am by yours. Always and forever. Stated Haku with a loving smile as she started falling asleep to the rhythm of his heart. And with that they slept until it came time for their shift. A few hours later. Alright, just give us a minute, yawned out the slightly tired Naruto. He then got dressed along with Baku, who he quickly healed using some of his chakra so they wouldn't notice her limp. The last thing they needed was Zabuza somehow finding out about their little escapade earlier. Once they were dressed, they stepped out of their tents and sat down on a random tree close by. Naruto then formed around 50 shadow clones to watch the camp while he and Haku enjoyed their alone time. Alright, but you may want to get comfortable because my tale is a long one and you might not love me like you do now afterwards. Said Naruto with a downcast expression on his face. Naru-koi, there is nothing in your past that could stop me from loving you. I am yours and you are mine. Stated Haku with a serious expression on her face before she brought her face closer to his for a quick kiss. So then Naruto told her everything about his life in Konoha, about Yuki, about him being a god, about Okami, and about his harem. He expected for Haku to hit him or yell at him. Even move away in fear of him, he would have understood, but what she did not only shocked him but showed just how much she really loved him. She pulled him in for a passionate kiss and he could taste the salt from the tears that were falling down her face and onto her lips. When they pulled away, Haku put her head on his chest and started crying. You idiot, I could never hate you for what happened to you. I could never hate you for such a stupid reason, and I could never hate you for what you are. Because I love you, Naru-koi, and I always will for the rest of my life. Yelled Haku in between her sobs. His life was so much like hers, but yet at the same time it was so much worse. Ignored by the ones you loved and hated by the ones you would be expected to protect for something out of your control. After she calmed down a little bit thanks to warm beat of his heart and the gentle rubbing on her back, she kissed him one more time before finishing. I don't care if I have to share you Narukoi because I know that what I feel for you is real and I know that what you feel for me is real. So please get it through that thick head of yours that I won't abandon you no matter what you do. I will always stand by, even if the whole world is against us. I will always be with you. That is my Nindo, said a now calmer Haku with a few stray tears that were wiped away just before Naruto closed the distance between their lips for a passionate kiss that lasted a couple minutes. Thank you Hakuheim, you have no idea how happy this makes. I am literally the luckiest man alive because of you and Yukiheim, said Naruto once they broke apart as he briefly dropped his special hand showing her what he really looked like. As silver met brown she couldn't help but get lost in his beautiful silver eyes. He hand went up to feel his face to make sure this was real and not a dream. You're so handsome, she said in an almost trance-like tone. One of the reasons for this could have been that the hormones his body naturally secretes was slightly affecting her view of him, and since they had a little bit of fun time earlier she was even more vulnerable to such hormones. The hormones are unable to change her feelings but rather they enhance them to a stronger point. This of course does not make her a fangirl, it simply makes her more loving towards him. He, if you're done stripping me with your eyes then I guess it's time for you to tell your story of the past, said Naruto eliciting an eep from his companion. Alright, but could you hold me while I speak? It may not be as bad as yours but it's still hard to talk about, replied Haku with a depressed look on her face along with a few stray tears leaking out of her eyes. She then proceeded to explain to him what happened to her when she found out about her bloodline limit. What her father did to her because of his fear of her powers. How her kind was treated simply because of what they could do. At this point she was crying into his chest, doing her best to continue. When she finally calmed down she told him about how she was found by Zabuza as he taught her how to use her bloodline after him seeing a few Hyouten users before the war had started. He showed her something that she thought she would never experience again. The love of a father. She first started out thinking that she would be nothing but a tool but started to truly believe that what he said was true. That he saw her as his daughter and that from then on he was her father. So for all rights and purposes she wasn't Haku Yuki, no she was Haku Momochi, daughter of Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the mist and one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Throughout her story Naruto was releasing huge amounts of ki and was really looking forward to finding this father of hers and slowly rip out his intestines as the man watched himself slowly die before being healed and having the process repeated for who knows how many times before finally burning the man from the inside out. Luckily for the man he was already killed by Haku in self-defense. However, when he saw her start to break down his rage subsided and decided that comforting her was more important than his rage. So he comforted her hoping to help her feel better. When she continued and told him about how Zabuza saved her from herself he felt his respect for the man rise by leaps and bounds. The man was definitely more than met the eye. Kuroyukiheim, I swear to you now that I will show Yagura and his men no mercy. I will make them rue the day they dared mess with one of my heims. They will wish they met with Yami instead of me. They will wish that the Shinigami was after their souls rather than myself after their very existence. I will make them rue the day they decided to mess with the ones I love and erase them from every plane of existence. Yelled out Naruto as he swore to right the wrong that was done to Haku and all of Kiri because of their Mizukage. And I swear to you Narukoi that I will be there to help you bring Konoha to its knees for the wrongdoings that they have done to you. We will freeze their hearts and shatter them with a touch. We will show them what happens when you with a Hyouten user and her husband. They better prepare because winter is coming. Spoke out Haku as she subconsciously froze the area around them in her anger. Yuki was getting so turned on by their anger and power that she had to relieve herself inside one of the private areas of the mindscape that belonged to her. Yup, when she finally got her turn with Naruto she wanted it to be an orgy. After all, the more the merrier. Throughout the entire conversation Zabuza had woken up and heard them talking. When he heard about Naruto's childhood he felt his respect for the boy grow as well as his hatred for Konoha. When he saw him comforting Haku when she was crying instead of trying to take advantage of her, and when he heard what he swore to her, he decided that he could trust him with his little girl. But if he hurt her then there would be blood to shed. He then decided to go back to sleep in order to give them some space. Once Naruto felt that Zabuza was gone, which happened to be right as Haku's speech to him ended, he passionately kissed Haku and they spent the rest of their shift make out with one another along with some harmless groping. Konoha. Day of public executions. The day for the civilian council's execution was delayed by a few days while they searched for Danzo. They had yet to find the man himself but had successfully destroyed his main base beneath Konoha and 4 other root bases that held a grand total of 4,000 root soldiers. While most of them were forced to be killed, they were able to capture a few operatives. One of which was Torun Aburame, who was thought to have died at childbirth and buried in the Aburame private graveyard. He was currently sitting in a cell that was guarded by fellow Aburame who controlled the same insects as him so that his attacks would be proven ineffective against them if he got past the chakra sealing seals on the walls of his cell. Normally it would be on his body, but due to his insects it was best to put the seals on the wall. Anyway, the ex-council members were being escorted by 2 Anbu operatives towards the cage tower. Every other villager that wasn't on a mission or dead were surrounding the tower in preparation for the execution. Once the ex-council members arrived, most of the village began cheering for them and calling them heroes for banishing the demon from Konoha. "Silence, you worthless scum," yelled out the last person the villagers thought would ever call them that. Their own Kage, the one they idolized as a hero among heroes. And here he was calling them scum. It was incomprehensible to them. "You fools called my own son a demon and beat him for crimes that were not his own. He had done no wrong to you, yet you foolishly let your hatred consume you. This is not the wool of fire that I believed in as I fought for my village in the war. You all doubted my abilities in sealing the beast's chakra when it concerned my son, but when it concerned my daughter you thought there were no flaws. So as of this moment Konoha is going to become what it was before Naidame-sama created the civilian council, a military dictatorship. You civilians will have no say in politics since you do not deserve it," yelled out Minato as some of his pent-up rage was released. There was no way for him to rid himself of it all until Danzo was dead at his feet, paying for his crimes with his life. As the villagers realized what they were hearing, a majority of them had fear etched on their face because without the civilian council to protect them there was nothing stopping them from their executions. Though they still held some hope that the cage in his rage would overlook that small detail. "Oh, and if any of you are thinking that I would forget about your crimes against my son, then you are sorely mistaken. However, if I were to kill all those who tried to kill my son, then Konoha would lose most of its citizens, so I have an alternative," stated Minato in a voice that was a little too sweet and a smile that was a little too innocent for this to be much better. However, the villagers started thinking that they would get off easy, however their hopes were shattered in seconds once he finished speaking. "The alternative will be for you to have your mind searched by a Yamanaka, and then if you have done anything against my son, then you will receive the same injuries that you have inflicted on him by either Ibiki or Anko, and just before you die from your wounds you will be healed by Tsunade so that the process can be repeated over again until you have felt every single injury that you have inflicted on my son," yelled out Minato with a smirk as he saw their hopes get crushed by his statement. He then gave the signal for the executions to start. The council members deserved a special execution, so he decided that there was nothing more special than having your soul eaten by the Shinigami only to endure the rest of time and space in agony and misery. How was he able to do this without forcing them to summon the Shinigami themselves? Simple. On a scroll placed in front of them he drew a seal for the summoning of the Shinigami but changed it so that the Shinigami would only devour the ones that had a specific seal already placed on them, which the ex-council members so happened to have on them instead of chakra-sealing seals. There was panic amongst the crowds when they saw the Shinigami devour the souls of their beloved council. Many fainted while others threw up their lunch, while others still lost all control of their bowels. But all of them knew that they were fucked for all the mistakes they made against the Hokage's now gone son. Council chambers a few hours later. Now that the civilian council was gone, there could actually be civilized conversations. Also, Minato had to replace the advisors of the Hokage. So standing behind him as his new advisor was Sarutobi Hiruzen. "Now since there is no civilian council to meddle in the affairs of shinobi, we will finally do something about the academy. First, we will be changing the graduation age from 12 to 15 years old. Also, there will be less points based on useless knowledge such as history and academics and more towards actually useful skills such as taijutsu, ninjutsu, genjutsu, etc. So any students that were supposed to graduate this year will have to wait another 3 years. We will also be making them perform their first kills when they turn 14 so that they don't freeze up in the middle of a mission. Any student unable to meet the requirements and take a life will be dropped from the ninja program without exception. Understood? Stated the Hokage. He had to make sure these kids were ready for whatever the future may throw at them. He could tell he'd be getting gray hairs by the time his daughter graduated from the academy. Back with Naruto and the gang. Are we there yet? I'd like to talk to this leader of yours as soon as possible if you wouldn't mind. Half said half ordered a certain Naruto. He couldn't wait to utterly destroy Yagura and his followers. They would pay for making Haku cry. Yes, we have just arrived Naruto-san, and I would recommend changing your clothes before we meet with Mei-sama. Responded Chojuro with slight annoyance. He was annoyed that the blonde had decided to separate from the group earlier in order to relieve his hunger, as he said it and returned covered in blood and a little bit of brain. It didn't help that Haku was also covered in the same fluids as Naruto since they had gone together. Due to Haku saying that she and her Narukoi don't spend enough time with one another. You know what, I would rather not delay our meeting any more than we already have, so no, I will not be changing my clothing. Stated Naruto. Neither will I, said Haku from attached to Naruto's arm. She simply loved the warmth of his body, so she tried to stay as attached to him as possible. Even going as far as both of them sleeping naked in order to maximize body heat, as Haku puts it. Not that Naruto complained, after why would he? Within a few minutes they were approached by a few Kirin in that seemed to be Junin level, who proceeded to speak with Ao. Once they finished their conversation they passed through, heading towards the largest stone in terms of width. It was clear that all of the buildings around them were created using Doden jutsus. Efficient and time-saving, as well as unnoticeable from above due to the mist density, which is probably made even denser by several ninjas using the ninpo. Hiding in the mist, no jutsu around the base, therefore enhancing this base's subtleness. However, due to the density of the mist, which is completely filled with large amounts of chakra, it's like a flare announcing our location if one is a sensor. Stated Naruto in a matter-of-fact tone. His deduction on the appearance of the base and its surroundings was spot on, and pointed out a major flaw on one of their defenses caused the nearby nin to start to sweat. They arrived at the building, and once they entered the room, Naruto laid his eyes on someone that reminded him of his biological mother in terms of figure, and also somewhat similar in the feeling of her chakra. She stood at 5 feet 8 inches, which was average for her age, and she had burnt orange hair covered her left eye and part of her nose, with a blue dress that reached her knees and split at the hip on the right side. Her breast size seemed to be around mid-D cup, with a nice bubble butt to complete her figure. Her legs were fishnet stockings that went under her Anbu grade shin guards that were connected to her ninja sandals. Her eyes were a beautiful seafoam green, and her luscious lips were a natural pink that one might mistake it for lipstick. Naruto knew it was natural because he didn't smell any lipstick from her. When she turned around from the wall that seemed to have a huge map of Kiri on it, she gasped when her eyes finally landed on Zabuza. She started trembling a little bit, and her head was held a little down so her hair covered her face from view. That's when Zabuza started slowly walking backwards with his hands held up in a position of surrender. Now let's stay calm here, Mei-chan. I know it's been a while, but please don't do anything drastic. Pleaded Zabuza as he actually looked terrified of what she would do next. Naruto couldn't help but wonder who this woman was and what she could do that left Zabuza a stammering mess. At least until he saw her somehow move faster than a Hiraishin and crash into Zabuza, sending them both into the closest wall, leaving cracks all around the wall. Zabuza looked as though all life had been sucked out of him. Zabuza! Yelled out Mei as she squeezed the life out of him. When she looked up at his face with an adorably teary look on her face, she saw that his soul was slowly escaping through his mouth. Imagine like an FMA, B. Oh no you don't, you asshole. You make me think you dead for years, and you tried to G out F it by trying to die. Hell no. She yelled out in a rage as her hair swirled around her as she grabbed his soul and threw it back into his body. Yup, she was definitely related to the Uzumaki clan in one way or another. Once his soul blew through his body, he opened his eyes and started holding his chest. Air. Oh, I had no idea just how much I loved thee. Yelled out Zabuza as he gasped for the much needed oxygen. Then he noticed Mei on her knees with her head down. He could hear her crying and was able to see her tears fall to the ground. He then did something no one who had ever heard about Zabuza Momochi would think capable of doing. He hugged her. Naruto immediately looked outside to make sure it wasn't the apocalypse while Haku tried to spell what appeared to be a genjutsu. "What are you two doing?" asked Zabuza as he held Mei while she cried her heart out in happiness and worry. "I am making sure the world isn't ending and Haku is making sure this isn't a genjutsu," stated Naruto as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Well, I can understand you by why Haku, I mean she knows that I am capable of hugging people," asked Zabuza in justified confusion. "Well, I thought it might be fun," stated Haku in all sincerity. Zabuza just stared with a deadpan while Naruto was laughing his ass off over in some random corner. In all this time Mei was crying but managed to calm down by the time their conversation ended. She stood up and she gave Zabuza a regular hug and rested her head on his chest. "Idiot, don't disappear on me like that ever again, you hear me? Do you have any idea how worried I was that you left me alone in this world?" yelled out Mei in a desperate voice as she held on to him as hard as she could in case he disappeared if she didn't do so. "Shush shush, it's alright Mei-chan. I'm here. I'll always be here by your side," comforted Zabuza as best he could. It worked and she calmed down and smiled at him. She then noticed that they weren't alone and blushed in embarrassment. "Oh hello, and who are you two kids?" she asked in a sweet voice as if she were talking to a child unable to care for themselves. She already pissed off Naruto with only 8 words. Damn, a new fucking record. "The woman next to me is Haku Momochi, adoptive daughter of Zabuza Momochi as well as his apprentice. I am Naruto Okami and I will be the one to end this war. Also, if you call me a child again after seeing what I am able to do, then I will rip out your ovaries and heal you without you ever finding out unless you have an examination by a medical professional," said Naruto with a sickly sweet smile and an aura of death around him. He hated being treated like a child by those he didn't consider his family. A boy called Fishcake Wolf claims. "It's Maelstrom, not Fishcake. Oh my bad." Maelstrom Wolf claims that he will be the one to end this hellish war with his girlfriend who happens to be Zabuza's apprentice and adopted daughter. "Did I miss anything?" said the possible Uzumaki in a tone that was dripping with sarcasm. "Actually, I'll be doing it alone and Haku is not my girlfriend, she is my mate," stated Naruto without missing a beat as held Haku by the waist while she rested her head on the top of his head since he was still under his special henge. Just as Mei was about to make a comeback, they sensed an incredible amount of chakra to the north of them and was approximately 30 meters away. "Yagura, B but H, how did he find us?" asked Mei in complete terror. This was their only base since they couldn't risk have multiple bases due to lack of communication. If this base fell, then they lost and Yagura won, and that terrified her. "Wow, I can't believe how lucky I am that this Jinchuriki is able to work together with his inner demon, giving him a powerful sensor inside his soul. Well, might as well get this over with so that Haku and I can be shown to our rooms and get a good night's sleep. Haku, Zabuza, I need you to make sure the rebels don't get in my way. I'll take care of the rest," said Naruto with absolute confidence. "Alright kid, just don't get yourself killed, understand?" stated Zabuza, not wanting his newest apprentice of about 1 week. After he was done with his short words of good luck, Haku came up and brought him for a passionate kiss and brought his hand toward her plump ass. "Hurry up and kill that bastard for okay. If you do that you'll get a rewards tonight," said Haku into his ear in a lusty voice. She then removed his hand from her ass and then walked away, and with a small sway of her hips to make sure his attention stayed on her for a little while longer. "Well, looks like we're gonna have to take them out faster than expected. You ready to come on out, Okami?" asked Naruto while walking towards the enemy as the rebels were all being evacuated to a safe distance away from the base. "Hell yay, brother. Let's show these fuckers just what the Okami brothers can do," responded Okami with a bloodthirsty grin on his face. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," said Naruto as a shadow clone poofed into existence next to him. He then noticed how the clones slowly started to change into Okami. So now standing 100 meters away from both of them was an army of no less than 1,000 Kiri nin loyal to Yagura, with Yagura himself all the way in the back waiting to see if he really needs to fight against whatever forces the rebels send his way. "Alright brother, let's get this massacre started," yelled out Naruto. After cancelling his special henge, he unsealed his scythes and charged towards the enemy while Okami simply charged forward on all fours. "Couldn't have said it better myself," roared out Okami as he reached the first enemy and ripped into his chest with one of his tails and then threw him towards more of the enemy and repeated the action with each tail several times. Naruto had yet to use any of his jutsus that were connected to his scythes and had just been slicing off limbs and shredding through the enemy quite literally. So far, after 5 minutes of slaughtering lambs, Naruto had killed around 160 enemies and Okami had killed around 150 enemies and noticed he was falling behind. Demon release. The alphas is pack, yelled out Okami. Once he gathered up enough chakra, it leaked out through every part of his body and formed a pack of about 20 silver wolves all around him. He was their alpha and they would follow whatever order he gave. So he gave them a simple one. Kill. And kill they did. Since they were pure chakra constructs, as long as he kept feeding them his chakra they would not fall. With this he'd be able to rack up the kills in no time. Damn it, he's getting more kills than I am. What to do? I got it, thought Naruto as began forming hand signs that Okami knew all too well. God damn it, that should be against the rules, thought Okami in anger. Once Naruto had gathered 2 taels worth of chakra and focused each one into his scythes, he yelled out the name of the jutsu as he jumped into the sky. Demon release. Shinigami's army of winged demons, yelled out Naruto as swung his blades out in front of him, releasing a tidal wave of black yokai that headed towards the army as they tried to take out Okami on the ground. Only 50 feet before hitting the ground, the black yokai changed into tiny winged demons that when coming into contact with anything they rotted it away within seconds and multiplied, using the rot to give birth to even more winged demons. Needless to say, Naruto was well in the lead with this jutsu that he created after thinking of ways to destroy the village of Konoha as deliciously as possible. With Haku, Zabuza, Mei, and the rest of the rebels. Who the hell is this kid and how is he doing this? Asked Mei in complete and utter amazement. With the jutsus this guy was pulling out of his ass, he might actually be able to kill Yagura, especially with that last technique. They looked like small black bats, except they had arms and legs longer than those of an actual bat. He is Naruto Okami, and he is my loving mate and future husband, said Haku in a happy tone. He is also turning me on immensely, thought Haku in continuation as she pressed her thighs together. She gasped when she saw Naruto bring his scythes together and form one large scythe that simply emanated death, as well as the cloak that was now covering most of his body. Oh shit, Narukoi is now really pissed if he's going into that form, whispered out Haku in complete amazement. The ground around her mate began to rot away and crack with every step he took. It seemed as though life feared him and fled whenever his presence was near. What is it? What is he doing now? Asked Mei in a mixture of fascination and fear. She was amazed at what he could do but feared at the thought of being on the wrong side of the battlefield when he was on it. That is his Shinigami Henkin, and he only uses on those that truly piss him off. He was initially only going to use this against Yagura, but one of his men must have said something that really pissed him off, replied Haku while eating from a random bag of popcorn that seemingly appeared out of nowhere. Back with Naruto and Okami a few moments before. Looks like I'm winning this, Okami. I am willing to accept the terms of your surrender over a few dozen boxes of Pak over a few dozen boxes of Paki, stated Naruto in a gleeful voice as he was winning this little game of theirs. You bastards, you think that this is a game? This is a war against those Digusting demonic bloodline users. They deserve to die for sleeping with demons in order to get their powers. They deserve to suffer for their abilities, yelled out one rather foolish Anbu, which started up a rallying cry for his fellow Anbu. However, this only signed their death warrants. Not just the death warrants for their bodies but for their souls as well. Hey dumbasses, I would commit suicide as fast as I could if I were you. Because you have just summoned the wrath of the Shinigami no Okami, stated Okami as he slowly started backing away from Naruto along with his wolves who returned to his bodies. I won't even give you bastards the chance to save your souls from being utterly obliterated, stated Naruto as he let his yokai fill his entire body. He recalled all of his winged demons and had them each crash into his body, slowly forming a cloak of darkness that completely covered his body. He had slammed his 2 scythes together and the handles began to merge together while the blades melted into the handles as they grew. Once the handle had grown to about 5 feet, it stopped. Then a blade slowly grew out from the top side of the blade and grew to reach around 3 feet in length and a whole foot in thickness. Every living thing has a time to live and a time to die. All things must turn to dust as they always must. And now it is your time to rot, suffer for your crimes. Jigoku Kara no Sume, yelled out Naruto as he swung his scythe into the ground until only an inch of the blade was still visible. Then suddenly there were thousands of long black tentacle-like arms with claws coming out of the ground. These arms first targeted the remains of those who were lucky enough to have already been killed. They were then somehow consumed by these hands. The bodies disappeared within seconds. The 200 troops that remained from the earlier were now absolutely terrified of what they had just seen. Their fellow brethren were being destroyed or eaten or whatever you wanted to call, but then they all realized something. They were next. And there was nothing to stop him, not even Yagura. So most of them did what Okami had told them to do. They killed themselves. The ones that didn't, tried to run away only to be consumed as they were running. However, for some reason after all of the soldiers had been consumed, only Yagura remained untouched. The tentacle arms had left alone. After all, he was Naruto's and Okami's prey to hunt, not theirs. Yagura, it is time you die for the crimes you have committed to those innocent of crimes they did not commit. Now suffer in the names of those that did not deserve to suffer. Die Yagura, the teenage mutant ninja turtle known as Donatello, yelled out Naruto as he pointed his scythe at the now identified Donatello of the Ninja Turtles.
That's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, then please like, share and do comments.